Call to order. And you will be automatically placed in queue. We have legal and
Halton, as we know it today,
is rich in the history and modern traditions
of many First Nations in the Métis,
from the lands of the Anishinaabe
to the Attawandaron,
the Haudenosaunee,
and the Métis.
These lands surrounding the Great Lakes
are steeped in Indigenous history.
As we gather today on these treaty lands,
our Catholic social teachings
call us in solidarity
with our Indigenous brothers and sisters
to honor and respect the four directions: lands,
waters, plants, animals, and ancestors
that walked before us.
All these wonderful elements of creation exist,
gifted to us by our Creator God. We acknowledge and thank
the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation
for being stewards of this traditional territory.
Please join me in the sign of our faith. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, as we begin this meeting today, we bring your presence with us. We speak your peace, your grace, your mercy, and your perfect order. We acknowledge your power over all that is spoken tonight and decide and done within these walls. Say this all in your name as we come together in your prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Give us our trespasses. Give those who trespass against us. Not temptation. If everyone could please stand for our national anthem.
Sorry. Thank you, Trustee Chua, for that. Item 1.2, motions arising from in-camera. There were no motions from the in-camera session that requires a vote in the public session. Now, next order of business is the approval of the agenda. And do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda? And do trustees want any item removed from the consent agenda? Give me a second. Trustee Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering if we could add as a miscellaneous item a discussion about the school climate survey, please.
Okay, so to add an item, we need a two-third vote. So your title is School Climate Survey. So we shall add that one item, take the vote. If it passes, we'll add that item. Then we'll go on to the next, okay? So Trustee Murphy, items, school. So we'll go to a recorded vote here. We need a seconder for that. By Trustee Murphy, seconded by Trustee Saunders. We'll go to recorded vote here. Trustee Kennedy, how do you vote?
In favor.
Trustee Uvanchanada.
Sorry, can you just state the title of?
School Climate Survey.
Yeah, in favor.
Trustee Uvanchanada.
In favor.
Trustee Agnew. Trustee Murphy.
In favor.
Trustee Saunders.
In favor.
Trustee Kelly.
In favor.
Trustee Carabella.
In favor.
Trustee Powell.
Sorry, just for discussion, is that?
Information item. Miscellaneous item, sorry.
In favor.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Chua.
In favor.
Trustee Bowie.
In favor.
Trustee Kuzma.
In favor.
So we have 8 in favor, none opposed, no abstentions. The item School Climate Survey will be added to miscellaneous item, and it shall be item sorry. Okay. Shall be item 12.4. So item 12.4 will be School Climate Survey. Okay, moving on, we have Vice Chair Agnew. You have your hand up next.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering if we could just take under the consent agenda, or under the noted items, the CCSTA information.
That's item
Sorry, I don't have.
6.2.2, the
Yeah,
consent
if we
agenda.
could take that out of that, if that would be okay.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
next we have Trustee Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wondered if we could just spend a few moments. This past Saturday was the second annual Skills Trade Career Fair, and I know our Superintendent of Education and Student Success, Emil Sordo, spent a lot of time on this, and I'm hearing some good feedback initial, but I wasn't able to attend, and I don't know if all trustees were. Could we just spend a couple of minutes on how successful that event was this past Saturday?
So you want to add an item to the agenda?
Miscellaneous item.
Okay, what would be the title of your miscellaneous item?
Second, Skilled Trades Career Fair discussion or update.
Okay, so it's going to work the same way. We need to take a vote, and we need to see if that passes, then we add it to the agenda. So that's Skilled Trades. What's the title?
A Skilled Trades Career Fair update.
So moved by Trustee Kennedy. Looking for a seconder, please. Trustee Carabella. I'll take this to a recorded vote. Trustee Ohan Chanara,
In favor?
Trustee Agnew, Trustee Murphy,
In favor.
Trustee Saunders, in favor. Trustee Kelly,
In favor.
Trustee Carabella,
In favor.
Trustee Powell, Trustee Kennedy,
In favor?
Trustee Chua,
In favor.
Trustee Bowie,
In favor.
Trustee Kuzma.
In favor.
Thank you. So we have 8 in favor, none opposed, no abstention. Item skill trades career fair update will be item 12.5 in the agenda. Thank you. We'll move on to Trustee Ohan Chanara. Trustee Ohan Chanara.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to add an information item, miscellaneous on tonight's agenda,
Thank you.
entitled Letter to Ministry, the Holy Cross.
Thank you, Trustee Ohan Chanara. So letter to ministry.
Letter to Ministry, Re Holy Cross Elementary School. And it would be under miscellaneous as an information item.
Holy Cross Elementary CS, right? Okay. So we go to the same process again. May I have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Trustee Murphy. I'll take this to a recorded vote. Trustee Ohan Chanara.
I'm in favor.
Okay. Trustee Agnew. Trustee Murphy.
In favor.
Trustee Saunders. In favor. Trustee Kelly.
In favor.
Trustee Carabella.
In favor.
Trustee Powell.
In favor.
Trustee Kennedy.
In favor?
Trustee Chua.
In favor.
Trustee Bowie.
In favor.
Trustee Kuzma.
In favor.
So we have 8 in favor, none opposed, no abstentions. Item will be number 12.6 in the agenda under miscellaneous items, and that will be okay. Do we have any further additions, corrections, or deletions to the agenda? Seeing none, we shall vote on the agenda as amended. May I have a mover for the agenda as amended? Trustee Murphy. Second, Trustee Powell. Okay, I'll take this to a recorded vote. You're voting on the agenda as amended, trustees. Trustee Agnew.
In favor.
Trustee Murphy.
In favor.
Trustee Saunders.
In favor.
Trustee Kelly.
In favor.
Trustee Carabella.
In favor.
Trustee Powell.
In favor.
Trustee Kennedy.
In favor?
Trustee Ohan Chanara.
In favor.
Trustee Chua.
In favor.
Trustee Bowie.
In favor.
Trustee Kuzma.
In favor.
So we have 8 in favor, none opposed, no abstention. Motion carries. The agenda is approved. Moving on to our next order of business, which is declarations of conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest to be declared tonight? Seeing none, we shall move on to our next order of business, which is presentations. Item 4.1, senior staff update. Director Klein, could you please introduce the presentation?
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to ask Superintendent Lofts to take the microphone. Sorry. Ask Superintendent Merrick to take the mic with regard to our guests and the presentation we're about to have.
Thank you, Director Klein. So tonight we have Mr. Steve Allum here with us. So Steve, you can set up your slides there if you want, Stevie. But so Steve is our manager of energy and environment with the board. So our guru of all things sustainability and green in nature. So he's going to share a little bit of our past results in light of Earth Day coming up on April 22nd here on Saturday. So that would be great to share some of our past green initiatives across the board and some of our performance over the past few years. So I'll turn it over to you, Steve.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have a few short slides here concerning the board's utility usage and carbon footprint. So just our schools are just like your home. They require heating and cooling, lots of things that are plugged in, lighting, so on and so forth. If we look at our electricity and natural gas use, which is demonstrated by this first pie graph, it is split pretty much right down the middle, 50-50, with a little bit of bias towards natural gas. So per unit of energy at all of our schools, we use about 47% electricity and 53% natural gas. However, if you go from look at that from a cost perspective, per unit of energy, electricity is much more expensive than natural gas. So if you look at it from a cost point of view, electricity is 82% of our utility costs, whereas natural gas only makes up 18%. This has actually been updated with several successive carbon levies over the last number of years. So that natural gas piece has actually grown from maybe 10% now to 18%, but still dwarfed by electricity. The opposite number would be emissions. If you look at our greenhouse gas emissions and compare the natural gas to electricity, natural gas is almost 90% of the emissions for our schools, whereas electricity only represents 11%. And that's by virtue of the fact that the Ontario electricity generation and grid is about 90% plus of low emission and renewable sources, solar, hydro, nuclear, and gas, or wind and biofuel, pardon me. So this, we were commissioned a report last year to try to get a snapshot in time of our carbon footprint at the Halton Catholic School Board. You can see here there's a number of elements to our carbon footprint. They're typically broken up into three sources, scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. If you look around as I advance the slide here, you'll see how those are represented. Our scope 1 emissions are our direct emissions from our schools. That would be our fleet vehicles and refrigerants and other combustible byproducts coming out of our boilers and such. That's about 6%. When we think of our utilities from the previous slide, it's only about 24% of our carbon footprint. That's our indirect emissions from the utilities, the generation and transmission of those. Renewables down at the bottom there is obviously acts as a small credit. And as I mentioned on the last slide, that utilities, the 24.1% of our entire carbon footprint is really the full graph on the last slide. So all of our natural gas, electricity fit into that 24.1%. The overwhelming majority of our carbon footprint are our scope 3 emissions, 70%, and that encompasses a number of items: purchased goods and services, commuting, construction, food waste, busing, even maintenance activities. You can see at the small breakdown of the books and supplies and purchased goods in the bottom right-hand corner there. This would refer to the emissions that would be needed to manufacture and transport all of our goods that we purchase for the board. Obviously, it's a burgeoning industry to try to understand what an entity's scope 3 emissions are. So this was our sort of a snapshot in time and our first attempt at that, to look at all emissions, scope 1, 2, and 3. To look at our utility performance over the last 5 years, is a number of good news items here. I'm going to bring up all 3 utilities. So you can see that from 2016-17 school year to now, all 3 utilities, we're showing a reduction in consumption on all 3. On electricity, we're to the tune of something around 6 million kilowatt hours per year between 5, 6 years ago and to today. We are also looking at on water on the right-hand side, which is the oft-forgot utility in all this, at about 41 million liters less now than we were using back in 2016-17, a market change. That's despite the fact that over the 5 years, we have 2 more facilities net. We have 53 more portables, all of them electrically heated. And our operating hours have gone up on average by about 10 hours per week. and we still have realized all these savings. How have we done it? Some strategies and tactics. A lot of the major capital projects that we do in July and August have resulted in a lot of these savings, new heating and cooling systems, LED lighting, so on and so forth. I am the proud curator of our state-of-the-art energy monitoring system, which I get to my phone every single day. And every 15 minutes, exactly what our schools are using in electricity, gas, and water. Can be a bit of a burden sometimes, the real deluge of information. But that said, I've got it to the point now where I could probably tell you if one classroom of lights is left on in any school. And timely maintenance and troubleshooting is also a key factor in this. If we have something that breaks down or has a equipment malfunction, getting to it in a timely fashion and repairing it, preventative maintenance and ensuring all those checks are performed regularly is a key piece of this. Final slide, and also a good news item. Each year, all 72 school boards across Ontario are ranked on their energy efficiency by an organization called Sustainable Schools. In 2022, Halton Catholic was rated #2 in Ontario, up from #4 the year before. You can see that you can see their number of facilities is 58 for us. The only school board that was above us had 7, and certainly the top in the GTA as far as ranking goes. Every year we have been in the top 15 since the study started, and I have no reason to believe that we would be any different in future years. Questions?
Thank you, Steve, for your presentation. I shall now open up the floor to trustees for questions, and I see a couple of hands up. Trustee Chua, your hand is up. You have the floor.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for this amazing presentation. I don't know if the Board of Trustees know, but you actually gave a similar presentation to our Student Senate, and they really appreciated that. I did have a question about where HCDSB is going in the future when it comes to environmental or green energy changes. I know that right now we're evolving into a greener and more sustainable community in the HCDSB, but are there any future plans, and what are the current future plans to ensure that we're able to sustain our environment right now? So I know that we're doing LED lights in the summer and we're switching to different heating and cooling units, but are there any updates of what's going on to ensure that in the future?
So it's a great question, and certainly a multifaceted one. There's a number of ways that you can improve the efficiency of our schools. As you can see from that pie chart that I had in the one slide there, I think a lot of our focus in the future is going to be trying to reduce our carbon emissions and take that some of those pieces of the pie, so to speak, that are larger than maybe a lot of us think they are, right? Whether it's transportation or purchase goods, construction even, and try to look at ways in reducing our carbon footprint. I think that that's probably where the future lies as far as developing a carbon reduction and maybe even a carbon neutral plan, net zero plan in the future. Certainly on-site generation for the solar arrays will be part of that strategy down the road. At this point in time, that's all kind of in the future, but certainly something that we will discuss as on-site generation is going to be needed to offset our utilities. There'll be a little bit of awareness campaigns, obviously, for some of those items, and certainly policy changes as well, as far as purchase goods.
Thank you. Trustee Chua, you have a follow-up?
It's not exactly a question, but I'd just like to thank you again. And also, if you need any student support, I know when it comes to environmental sustainability, students aren't really involved in the question, but I know a bunch of students who are eco-warriors in our board and who'd love to help expand your efforts in creating our board into a cleaner and greener board. So I'd just like to thank you again for coming tonight.
Thank you, Trustee Chua. Thank you. Next up is Trustee Murphy. You have the floor.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. My question was, the board has an energy conservation and demand management plan that I just happened to review.
That I authored, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, how do like from what you presented, have our targeted energy savings been met or exceeded in relation to that plan?
That's a very easy answer. Exceed.
Good, awesome, great, thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Murphy. Any follow-up? Oh, you're done? Yeah, thank you. Next up is Trustee Carabella. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation as well. So when you spoke about your monitoring that you do every 15 minutes, and so you receive some information at some point, how do you respond if it's out of the ordinary or something? What is the response to that?
It will depend on maybe the utility. A lot of the times, where I have an alarming feature is this as part of this monitoring system too. That's how I get the information to my phone and to my desktop on the web. Generally speaking, if it's water, it's maybe a plumber call or, talk to our custodians. If it's energy, electricity particularly, could be any number of things. Like I say, I do have some schools broken down by sections of the school, so I can actually tell if it's target where that actual problem may lie, whether it's lights or some of the mechanical equipment. A lot of that, we have a pretty robust work order system as well, so a lot of that goes into our work order system and gets dispatched accordingly. The tricky part for me, of course, is handling all that information and getting it out in a timely fashion, but I've kind of got it to a good point now. It took a number of years.
Thank you. Trustee Carabella, you have a follow-up?
No, thank you. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Trustee Saunders.
Thank you through you. I'm just wondering, are there any sort of imminent opportunities to partner with municipalities or any other groups to sort of further this, things like recycling of waste or capturing rainwater? Or is there anything that we're working on? Is there any opportunities coming up?
Superintendent Merrick might have a little bit better of an idea on some of the strategies from a facilities point of view. I can tell you that we are partnering with the Halton Region Waste Management all the time. I deal with them on a regular basis as far as trying to make sure that our recycling and composting programs, I also do, as part of my job, handle the waste management for the board. So we are making sure that, we're trying to minimize the carbon emissions from those as well. I know that we have spoken about perhaps partnering with the municipality to capture some off gases and things like that from new arena constructions and that. But at this time, it's only just sort of in the planning and discussion phase.
Thank you. Superintendent Merrick, you would like to add? Okay, good. Thank you. Trustee Kennedy, you're up next. You have the floor.
I was wondering, when we do certain energy efficient, let's say LED lights or other examples, do we buy those in bulk with other boards, or do we do that on our own?
It's a bit more of a convoluted answer than you might think. It depends on the type of LED lighting that you're doing. No, typically we do that on our own. That we get enough economy of scale pricing for a school, particularly a high school, that partnering with other boards doesn't get you any more kind of savings other than that. For example, a high school probably has 4,000 or 5,000 lights in it.
Thank you, Trustee Kennedy. You have a follow-up?
Yeah, just wondering, our ranking, how much is our ranking dependent on, we rely on the grid for obviously like electricity and natural gas. Does it change with other schools being in areas that maybe have, I know we're really high ranked, but more access to electricity and less to natural gas with their ranking? Does that impact the ranking of the school board, or is it specifically what we're doing as a board, not the inputs? Like we can't rely on what the government chooses for clean energy.
Sustainable Schools does the rankings, takes a lot of the publicly available information and does a lot of calculations pertaining to weather. It does a separate calculation with electricity and natural gas and what the potential savings for each board is. It's normalized as much as possible to make sure that it's as even a competition, if you like, across all 72 boards.
Thank you. Up next is Trustee Ovenchanada. Sorry, you had clarifications? Okay, go ahead.
So what would you say we're doing differently than, say, other boards that are not as strong as us? And what can we do we're in fourth, right?
Second this year.
Second. Oh,
yeah.
That was 2021.
Yeah.
So I guess there's not much room to grow here, but
and the board above us being only 7 schools, we are certainly operating on a different scale than them.
Okay, I see. What would you say we're doing differently than, say, boards that are not as highly ranked? Like, what is there like a major project that you took control of that made a big change?
There's a couple things there. We have always been very strong about controlling our heating and cooling systems of our schools centrally. We don't give a lot of control to the building occupants, maybe plus minus a degree. That certainly helps energy savings so that there aren't a lot of gradients or difference in operation across the school or different schools. Back to the monitoring for a second. We're the only board in Ontario that, and I'm confident in saying this, that has that type of oversight over our utilities every 15 minutes for all three utilities, electricity, gas, and water. Water was the one that I added when I came here at the school board, and we are, like you can see, 41 million liters less than probably, that was the second year that I was here. So these kind of things, you can't do anything unless you measure them. That was sort of my, how my engineering training taught me prior to coming to the board. So I figured we needed to get as much measurement and information about how our schools were doing in a real-time fashion. And that's, I think, been the biggest thing for us.
Thank you. Up next is Trustee Hunchinara. You have the floor.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, to Steve. So well done. I mean, for my term as a trustee, the first one and this one, it's always a good news story. And I appreciate all the work that you are doing, and even the occupants, as you call them, at the facilities, you know, maybe putting on an extra sweater to help us sustain. And I'm willing to launch an appeal. I will support you 100% to knock Northwest out of #1 and bring us there because of.
Well, maybe just be patient. Maybe this year we will be.
I'm here for you, Steve. If you need me to launch an appeal, I got your support. But
okay.
Well done. And all joking aside, it's always been a good news scenario. So thank you to the environment as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Hunchinara. I see no other hands up. So Steve and team, Superintendent Merrick, Director Klein, just want to thank you and your team for all the wonderful work that you've done. There is room to grow. You're #2. So next time we expect to see something better. But anyway, good job done. Thank you so much for coming to the board and present.
Thank you.
We shall move on to the next two items, 4.2 and 4.3. And this time we are going to be doing slightly different. Although these items are in presentation here, they are slightly different items, handled slightly differently. And before we proceed, I'm going to call on a legal to explain to us what we are doing with this item. So may I have Brad? Yeah. Speak to trustees about why we have these two items here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. Just to provide context to the two matters that the board is about to deal with, there are public meetings that are mandated under the Education Act that the board is required to convene as part of the process of passing an education development charge bylaw. And we'll get into, Mr. Amendoli and I will get into details of the bylaw and all the calculations later, but for now, so for the benefit of the trustees, so these meetings are mandated under the Education Act. So these are not regular presentations or delegations that the board often hears from members of the public, parents, etc. The Education Act, as board members will know, is provincial legislation. And it mandates or it directs that as part of these public meetings, that any member of the public who wishes to address the board during either of the two public meetings has to be given the opportunity to do that. And everything I'm saying might be academic because it doesn't appear there's any members of the public here, but if I'm wrong, so the Education Act directs you have to hold the public meetings. You have to allow members of the public to, who do attend, to address the board. And since we're dealing with mandatory provisions of the Education Act, they supersede or prevail over the board's procedural bylaws and internal rules that govern the rules that govern regular delegations and presentations to the board, where members of the public have to register, so many days in advance, and I don't know the specific rules of this board, provide information on what they wish to address. Those rules don't apply here. And it's not that the board's rules are being waived or anything of that sort. It's simply that the Education Act is provincial legislation, it's superior legislation, it governs. And so it's my respectful advice to the board, if there are members of the public who do attend for the public meetings this evening, that they be allowed to address the board whether or not they've complied with the board's rules, because you'll be complying with the provisions of the Education Act to do that. I hope that explanation, Mr. Chair, is useful.
Thank you, Brett. Trustees, do we have any questions for Brett at this point in time? So I have a little script which I have to read. Okay. So similar to 2018, where we did this exercise last, the Halton Catholic District School Board is proposing to enact the EDC charges bylaw, which will apply to the land in the region of Halton. The new bylaw is required because the current bylaw of the board will expire on July 3rd, 2023. The board is at this meeting is conducting 2 public meetings as part of the new bylaw. The first public meeting will deal with the review of the current EDC policies of the board as reflected in its EDC bylaws. The second public meeting will address the proposed bylaws that the board anticipates passing next month. The Education Act, which is the legislation that governs EDCs, requires the board to convene these 2 meetings, and we have heard it from legal now. The primary purpose of any board in implementing educational development charges is to provide a source of funding for new school sites. These are not funded by a grant under the province's funding model. The EDC calculation is based on new people that will be generated by housing units within the region of Halton, for which building permits will be issued over the 15-year planning period, and for which additional school accommodation is required. The board has worked in close cooperation with the Halton District School Board in developing the proposed EDC charges for each board. The public board will hold its EDC public meeting tomorrow evening. If there are anybody who would like to give consideration to submissions to this EDC, they are welcome to present it tonight. In addition to the 2 public meetings being held tonight, school board staff, consultants, and legal counsels have convened 2 stakeholder meetings with representatives of the development industry and the area municipalities to inform them of the board's EDC proposal. As you may be aware, the board will likely be giving final consideration to the passage of the EDC bylaw at the board meeting scheduled for May 16th, 2023. So with that, I shall move into item 4.2. 2023 educational development charges.
Point of order, Chair. I had a question for Mr. Teichman before you start. May I please ask him?
Can you state your point of order, Trustee Hunchana?
That I have my hand up before you started reading that, so I have a question.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
Just a very quick question. I'm sorry to interrupt. I let you read that, but sorry, Mr. Teichman, just a quick question, clarification. Even though this is embedded in our regular board meeting, legally, it's still considered a public meeting. That's what I just want to get clarity on.
Yes, that's right. It's being treated as a regular agenda item, but it's really a meeting within a meeting. Well, there'll be 2 public meetings, so meeting within a meeting. Yes.
Okay, just to follow up,
yes,
Mr. Chair. So just for my own brain, it's still considered a public meeting, even though it's embedded in a regular board meeting.
That's
so if
right.
I was coming from the public, it would appear to be a regular board meeting, not a public meeting that I could come to, but we're still good.
Well, the board meetings are public meetings in themselves, as you know,
Okay.
except for the part that's done in camera at the beginning at 6:30 or so. But yeah, someone might not know, but someone who shows up and heard the explanation or the direction from the chair would know this is the public meeting prescribed under the Education Act for education development charges.
Perfect. Thank you for that clarity. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Hunchanara. With that, as I said, we are into item 4.2, 2023 educational development charges, bylaw policy review public meeting. We will begin the proceedings with the policy review public meeting, followed by the public meeting for the proposed bylaw. The consultants and lawyer for the board will make presentations in both meetings. Members of the public who would like to address the board are welcome. I would now like to invite Brad Tickman of Overland LLP, the board's legal counsel, to make a brief presentation on the legal requirements of the policy review.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there's three main legal requirements, three major legal requirements the board has to comply with as conditions precedent to passing an education development charge bylaw. Board members are probably aware the current bylaw will expire at the close of business on July 3 of this year, at the conclusion of its 5-year term. So a replacement bylaw is required so that the board can continue to collect education development charges. Mr. Amendolia will explain all the details about how the bylaws, the charge is calculated, etc. But the three main requirements are the holding of these public meetings, the preparation of a background study, which Mr. Amendolia has undertaken and, as I understand, has been provided to members of the board, and also ministry approval of a number of the assumptions that are embedded in the background study. The board's it's really the board's projections of the number of students that will be generated by development over the next 15 years and the number of schools that will be required to accommodate those students. So the ministry has to approve those projections, assumptions. They've been provided to the ministry. So following the conclusion of the meeting this evening, the board will have completed 2 of the 3 requirements, which are the public meeting, the preparation of the background study, and then subject to receiving ministry approval, which is the big item, the board will be in a position to, have the legal authority to pass the replacement bylaw, and I understand that's scheduled for the board meeting that'll take place on May 16 next month. So those are the legal requirements. There's others, but those are the 3 main ones that I thought would interest the board members. And again, Mr. Amendolia is here, who has all the details on how the charges are calculated.
Thank you. Trustees, do we have questions for Mr. Tickman? No? Okay, I would now like to invite Mr. Amendolia of Watson and Associates, the board's economic consultant. Mr. Amendolia. Thank you, Mr. Amendolia. Trustees, do we have questions? Trustee Ohan Chinara, I see your hand up. You have the floor.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. This may be a very silly question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Why would anyone do a voluntary exemption if it takes away revenue?
No, no such thing as silly questions, but no, that's a great question. Largely out of discussions with the development community or stakeholders or municipalities. And I'll give you one example. So years ago, Mr. Teichman and I were doing a bylaw for the Niagara Catholic District School Board. And that bylaw was appealed actually not by developers, but by some of the municipalities. Wanting to see an area specific bylaw in certain parts of their jurisdiction, and especially in some of the existing downtown areas. So as a compromise through negotiating the appeal, the board agreed to exempt downtown business improvement areas in select municipalities. So again, that's any revenue that comes from those EDCs, the board accepts that that's a revenue loss, but it was done as a way to appease, or maybe that's the wrong word, collaborate with their municipal partners to reach a satisfactory conclusion. So that's one example of why a board might do it. But again, they're fairly rare in terms of voluntary exemptions, and where they exist, it's obviously discussed with board staff and the trustees of what kind of revenue loss might the board, we don't know exactly, but we could look at what might be the impacts if we exempt ABC.
Thank you, Trustee Owen.
Thank you, Mr. So I guess really, if it's being added to the building permits, it would be the builders that would say, hey, we're looking for an exemption or maybe appeal this because we won't be able to build if you're adding these EDC or these charges, something like that. Right?
Yeah, typically you would think so, but oddly enough, two of the bigger appeals have been from municipalities looking for area-specific charges. Years and years ago, again, Mr. Teichman and I were involved, I think it's about 20 years now, 2003, I think, Brad. But one of the largest appeals that actually ended up going to divisional court was municipalities in Northern Simcoe appealing the bylaw, wanting to see a smaller charge for Northern Simcoe compared to Barrie and Southern Simcoe. So, yes, typically the feedback that we get or issues we get are from the development community, but it can be from other stakeholders like municipalities as well.
Great, Trustee Owen.
Sorry, and I just thought of this question, just popped in my head. Do the municipalities, do they charge us a fee for handling these EDCs?
No,
for doing the transfer?
No. So through the chair, so we don't charge a fee to the municipalities to collect for us. Nor do they charge a fee to handle it for us. But what they're allowed to do is any interest that's collected on the EDC money, so they're collecting it, they hand it over at the end of the month. If there's interest that's been collected on that revenue, the municipalities are able to keep that interest. So I guess that's the bone, if you will, that the legislation throws the municipalities to offset some of their collection costs.
I knew nothing was. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Chandra. Up next is Trustee Saunders. You have your hand up. You have the floor.
Through you, I wanted to thank you. I had an opportunity to meet with the North Oakville MPP, myself and the public school trustee, and we were discussing EDCs. And I wanted to thank you and Superintendent Loss because I felt very well prepared for the discussion. And there were a lot of issues that we were enlightening the MPP with. So I just wanted to sort of loop back and thank you for that. So that's it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Saunders. At this point in time, I would open it up to delegates if at all we had anybody who would like to speak, but I don't see any delegates. So, with this, we conclude the policy review public meeting. I will need a motion to adjourn the policy review public meeting. Is that right, Mr. Teichman? I need to adjourn this. Okay, thank you. So may I ask for a mover and then I need a seconder. Trustee Saunders moves.
I'll second.
Trustee O'Hearn Chinara seconds. Now we are voting on the motion to adjourn the EDC policy review public meeting. Trustee Murphy, how do you vote?
In favor.
Trustee Saunders? In favor. Trustee Kelly?
In favor.
Trustee Carabella?
In favor.
Trustee Powell?
In favor.
Trustee Kennedy?
In favor.
Trustee O'Hearn Chinara?
In favor.
Trustee Agnew? Trustee Chua?
In favor.
Trustee Bowie?
In favor.
Trustee Kuzma.
In favor.
So we have 8 in favor, none opposed, no abstention. The motion carries. We have concluded the policy review public meeting. We shall now move on to the next part, which is item 4.3. That's 2023 educational development charges, bylaw proposed EDC, bylaw renewal public meeting. Superintendent Loft, should I go ahead or would you like to? Thank you. Last time I missed that. We will now commence the public meeting concerning the proposed bylaws and the background studies. During this public meeting, we will be inviting a consultant to give us an overview of the process and methodology supporting the proposed EDC bylaws and the charges. We will also be asking our lawyer to explain briefly the text of the bylaw, which is found in the background studies. I would now like to invite Jack Amendolia of Watson and Associates to make a presentation on the proposed EDCs. Jack, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Me again. Hi, everyone again. So now we're going to get into, so we talked about the policies of the existing bylaw. This next second public meeting is to talk about the proposed new bylaw background study and EDC bylaw. So we move to the first slide. So let's first talk about what the existing charge looks like. So again, I'll get into some of these details, but if you recall from last time we spoke, it's a phased in charge now. It has a maximum increase. It could only go up $300 maximum per year on the residential side and 10 cents on the non-residential side. So you can look at the chart on the screen now. You can see that when the bylaw was amended in 2021, the residential charge was $3,169. It went up by $300 in year 4 to $34.69, and another $300 in year 5 to $37.69. Similarly, on the non-residential side, it was 74 cents when the amendment was enacted. 84 cents the year after in year 4, and the current charge is 94 cents. So you're in the 5th year of the bylaw. It expires after 5 years. So that's why we're talking about a bylaw renewal today. We move to the next slide. A couple of key elements, and I'll be pretty quick on these because I think Mr. Teichman touched on them as well as through my policy review presentation. But a couple of things are important to remember for trustees and the public. The EDC enables recovery of growth-related land costs only. So an important differentiator is that EDC monies can be used to purchase a site for a new school. It can be used to prepare that site for construction of a new school, but that's where the EDC monies stop. It can't be used towards the actual construction of the new school. That's where New People Place grants from the ministry come in. Not all school boards have EDCs, and the question is, why don't they? Because you have to meet an eligibility trigger to qualify for an EDC. That eligibility trigger basically says that your 5-year projected enrollment has to be greater than the board's on the ground permanent bricks and mortar capacity. So it's basically saying, does the board have an enrollment need that is greater than it can accommodate today? If the answer is yes, you qualify for EDCs. And the last parts are what I talked about in the policies. They can be jurisdiction-wide or area-specific, differentiated or uniform, residential or non-residential. So what does a school board have to do? So again, I don't want to take Mr. Teichman's steam away from his presentation. So he's going to get into and already alluded to some of the main elements of what a board has to do. But to quickly summarize, background study has to be prepared. We've done that. It has to be approved by the Minister of Education. That's in process. 2 public meetings. At the end of this public meeting, we'll have fulfilled that. The study itself has to be available to the public at least 2 weeks before the first public meeting, so at least 2 weeks from today. That has been fulfilled as well. And the notice of these public meetings had to be provided at least 20 days before this meeting, and that was done through local newspapers as well as Toronto Star. Next slide, please. So getting into the calculation itself, it's pretty technical, it's pretty formulaic. There's not a lot of room for leeway or creativity. The Education Act and Ontario Regulation 2098 dictate quite specifically, almost on a line-by-line basis, of how these things need to be calculated. And really, when we think about it, it's really the projections and demographics that help us determine the need. It's legislation, like I talked about, that tells us how many school sites we can actually acquire based on that demographic and projected need. We have to attach a cost to those, and that's where the board hires qualified land appraisers to provide per acre costs throughout the region of Halton. We look at site preparation costs. That's how much does it cost to prepare that land to build the school on. We look at what your existing reserve fund balance is. So every time you collect EDC funds, you spend EDC dollars, they all go into an EDC account. So we have to do a calculation to see what your balance is before we calculate the new bylaw. And really those are your total net education land costs. That number that we come up with is what we try to collect for. We divide those over the number of units or over the square footage, and that's how you get your EDC rate. So, you know, it can get a bit complex in terms of coming up with the assumptions, but the calculation itself, like I said, is very formulaic and quite simple, really. And like we talked about, it's really the board policies then that determine how you're going to collect that charge. So if we get into some of the major assumptions over the next couple of slides, the first one we're going to look at is the residential forecast. It's the most important. It's what's driving this need for new schools. It's what's driving enrollment growth. So right now, and maybe just a quick note for the trustees and anyone listening from the public, growth forecasts are in a great state of flux because of you know, some of the situations happening with affordable housing, the pandemic, increases in or changes in migration, and a lot of the provincial legislation that's been released over the last year or so are causing a lot of municipalities and regions to review their growth forecast. So just want everyone to be aware that, you know, this is the best information that we have at the time. This may change over the next couple of years, and we will ensure, or your board staff will ensure, that if things are changing significantly or dramatically, we will talk to the trustees about this bylaw. But as of now, we're looking at about 88,000, almost 89,000 new residential units in the region over the next 15 years in Halton. From a density split, we're looking at about 25% low density homes, so your typical sort of single and semi family homes, and about 75% of all future development is going to be medium or high density. So we're moving towards an era where we're going to see a lot more townhouses and a lot more condos and apartments, especially in the region of Halton. There's been a lot of transportation developments, corridors around new GO stations, really high density developments that are expected to come online. So that's kind of what our residential forecast looks like over the next 15 years. Like I mentioned, in addition to the residential forecast, we talk about the non-residential forecast as well. So similarly to forecasting how many units are going to be built, we have to forecast how much non-residential square footage is going to be built. And again, reliant upon region of Halton forecast for this. So it looks like about 77, a little over 77 million square feet of gross floor area are expected to be constructed over the next 15 years. But again, thinking back about some of the exemptions I spoke about and some of the statutory exemptions. So one thing that's statutory is if you're building industrial square footage, anything over 50% or under of your original square footage, so an addition that's 50% or below the original square footage, is exempt from EDCs. So we work that in. In addition, certain institutional uses are also exempt from EDCs. So when you see that 77 million forecasted square foot, we have to take those exemptions off to account for it in the calculation. So the actual net gross floor area that we're using in the forecast is about 51.1 million. So those are your two sort of main denominators to calculate the charge. So if we sort of go forward and look at some of the other assumptions. So what did I say? Another important thing we need to know is how many new pupils are those new units going to create? So that's what we're looking at here is if you look at the top row, and in each column is elementary on the left and secondary on the right, we see that on the elementary panel, there's about 10,667 new students expected from those new units that are projected. On the secondary panel, about 40, a little over 4,600, 4,692. But before we include all of those students as net growth related pupil places, the legislation says we have to do one thing first. We have to look at any available and surplus space that the school board has. So if you have surplus spaces at schools, those have to be used up first. then you have your EDC eligible pupils. So you see that 10,667 less the available pupil spaces of a little under 2,500. Your EDC eligible pupils are 8,173. So that's what we collect EDCs for. On the secondary panel, we reduce it by that 1,359 of available space. So we can collect based on 3,334 secondary pupils. So now the next part of the calculation is we know the forecast. We have an expectation of how many students. We have to start translating this into land and into financials as well. So how do we do that? Well, the legislation really helps us here. So in the Ontario Regulation 2098, so in the legislation that governs EDCs, this chart is contained in that legislation. And what this chart says is that if you're designing a school based on the number of students, so the capacity that's in the left columns for each of the elementary and secondary, you're eligible for a certain number of acres. So if you're building a school anywhere from 0 to 400 capacity, you get 4 acres, 401 to 500, you get 5 acres, and so on all the way up to 8 acres for elementary. And in secondary, larger sites, 1 to 1,000, minimum 12 acres, all the way up to a max of 18 acres. So again, now we know our students. Working with your board staff, they say, we typically build schools of X number of capacity. So using that information, we now know how many acres we need, right? So again, following along, growth forecast, enrollment projections, new pupils, land area. So what's that final piece of the puzzle to calculate the EDC? Attaching those values to the EDC. So if we look at the next slide, like I said, the board retained Cushman and Wakefield, and you've used these appraisers for most of your bylaws, if not all of them, several years. And they performed appraisals on different sites throughout the region. And if you look at the chart on the screen now, you can see the values per acre that are estimated based on the 2022 values. So in Burlington, about 3.8 million an acre, Oakville, about 3.72 million an acre, Milton, a little under 3 million, and Halton Hills at 2.6 million. So quite significant land values that we're talking about in the region. And these have increased pretty much, I think with the exception of immediately when COVID hit, these values have increased every year, practically every bylaw that the board has had a bylaw in effect. So now that we have these numbers, we basically apply these numbers to the per acres that we have to get our total net education land cost. So that's what we're looking at here. So we've come up on the residential side, assuming 85% of those total costs are attributed to residential. We come up with about $448.2 million. Like I said, we take those and we divide those over the denominator of the residential forecast, that 87,682, to get a uniform residential rate of $5,112 per residential unit. Very similar on the non-residential side, we take 15% of those land costs, assign them to non-residential, that's that 79.1 million, and then we divide it over the net non-residential square footage forecast, that 51.1 million I talked about earlier, to get $1.55 per square foot gross floor area. So those are your maximum EDC rates. If I was doing this presentation in 2017, those would be the charges that we'd be asking the Board of Trustees to approve. However, if we move to the next slide, I'll try to be brief because we explained this at the last meeting, but since that's happened, there's been some legislative changes. So I don't want to go into too much detail. I'll try to be brief, but really the important thing for the trustees to know is that in 2018, the legislation was basically, or the EDC rates were basically frozen and on a temporary basis at first, and then permanently through a legislative change. And when I say they were frozen, the legislative change said that any boards that are enacting EDC bylaws after August 31st, 2018 could enact a new bylaw, but the rate would have to be the same as it was on August 31st, 2018. A little bit later, several months later, the ministry revised that legislation again. And I like to say the thaw to the freeze. What they allowed was the board to increase rates, but with a phased in capped approach. And it basically said that whatever your existing rate was, you can go up, like I said at the beginning of the presentation, by $300 per year on the residential side 10 cents on the non-residential side until you reach your maximum rate or the 5 years of the bylaw is up. So instead of us asking the board to approve that maximum rate, you're basically going to approve, and if we move to the next slide, you're basically being asked to now approve a phased in capped rate. Just move up a little bit. Thank you. So that just really describes what we just talked about in terms of that phase in. And if we move to the next slide, we'll look at what these proposed rates are. So again, keeping in mind, what was your existing rate that we talked about at the beginning? Today, it's 3,769 residential, 94 cents per square foot non-residential, incorporating the $300 per year maximum increase. So if the board enacts a new bylaw, your immediate next charge in year one of that bylaw up by $300 would be $4,069. It would increase all the way by $300 up until year 5, because in year 5 you actually hit your maximum proposed rate of 5,112. On the non-residential side, again, very similar. Your existing rate is 94 cents, goes up by a maximum of 10 cents. So your year 1 rate is going to be $1.04 and going up by 10 cents for the full 5 years of the bylaw. On the non-residential side, you do not hit your maximum rate. So really just to finish off, and I think we've talked about this a little bit, just the last slide gets into some of the public process and what we've done so far to communicate with the public. So like we mentioned, we've now, or very shortly, we will have concluded our 2 public meetings and the notice has been given. We've released the background study both to the public, to your coterminous boards, as well as the Ministry of Education. We've been corresponding with stakeholders. It was mentioned that we've had 2 stakeholder meetings, but there's been correspondence with stakeholders, information sharing throughout the process. And there's still time. So if there is anyone from the public listening, we still, want to hear from you. We still expect to hear feedback, and we'll let the trustees know as it comes in. And at the passage meeting next month, we will let the trustees know if we've received any additional significant feedback. So I think I'll stop there. And
Thank you, Mr. Amendolia. I shall open up the floor to trustees for questions. Trustees, do we have questions? If not, we understood everything. Yeah. So with that, I shall now invite Mr. Tekman to present the legal part of it, the draft bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The bylaw, the draft bylaw is found at the back, at the end of the background study. It's at the very end. So I'll just give a high level explanation of how the bylaw works. The taking the charges that were just explained to us, the bylaw imposes a charge on residential development on a per dwelling unit basis. A dwelling unit is defined as a room or a suite of rooms that contains both washroom and kitchen facilities. So a self-contained unit, the charge is imposed on that basis. Excuse me. And it's, if one house is put up, 1 charge is payable. If it's a semi, it's 2. If it's of a 100-unit condominium, 100 charges are payable. On the non-residential side, the charge is imposed on a per square foot basis of gross floor area. Excuse me, and it's based on outside measurements. The charge is collected at building permit by the area municipality, which issues the building permit. They're required to collect the charge and submit it to the board on the 25th day of the month following the month in which the charge is collected. The bylaw offers limited exemptions. I think we heard the explanation why. That's because there's really no other source of information, no other source of revenue to make up for exemptions. So those would be revenue losses to the board. And just to give an indication of what the exemptions are, this board, as with most, have very few, I'd call discretionary exemptions. They're mostly the ones that the statute imposes. So what's exempt are lands owned and used by the region, a local municipality, another school board, a public hospital receiving aid under the Public Hospitals Act. That's a discretionary one, the hospital. A place of worship owned by a religious organization, discretionary. A cemetery or burying ground, that's discriminate. That's discretionary, but I don't see those as being a big moneymaker. And also land or buildings owned and used by Metrolinx. That's not really discretionary. Metrolinx is a government agency, so it would be exempt. But there's a host of other exemptions that the province implemented in the last few years, and these are mandatory. Private school, long-term care home, retirement home, a hospice or other facility that provides palliative care, child care center, memorial club or a clubhouse owned by the Royal Canadian Legion. Also, community colleges, universities, and lands owned and occupied by an Indigenous institute. The bylaw also exempts agricultural buildings that are used for non-residential purposes. So those are the exemptions. Most of the ones I just mentioned are mandatory. The bylaw also provides limited exemptions for residential intensification. If someone has a house and they, renovate the basement, turn it into a self-contained unit with washroom, kitchen facilities, zone entrance, etc., that would be exempt. But there's limits on those as well. There's also exemptions for demolitions. If someone knocks down a house and replaces it with another house, then there's no charge payable, provided the building permit for the replacement dwelling is issued within 5 years of the demolition. Same on the non-residential side. The building is demolished, replaced, no charges payable, provided it's replaced within 5 years. If the replacement building is larger than the original building that was demolished, EDCs are payable on the difference. This bylaw is proposed to have a 5-year term. That's the maximum permitted under the legislation, and we recommend that to the board. We're also recommending that this bylaw come into force on June 1st, so 2 weeks after the date it's passed, which is scheduled to be May 16. That's in order to provide the municipalities and the development industry a brief opportunity to retool and get ready for the new charges. And under the legislation, the board has discretion as to when the new bylaw comes into force, but it has to be at least 5 days after the bylaw is passed. So the earliest could be so pass it May 16. The earliest it could be is May 21, which I think would be on a weekend, so it would be the following Monday. Again, the new bylaw term runs until the close of business on July 3. So there is some leeway there between June 1st and July 3 as to when the new bylaw comes into force. But whatever the date is, you have our recommended date. And on the date the new bylaw comes into force, the existing bylaw that was enacted in 2018 will be repealed. So it would only be on the same day one is enacted, the existing bylaw is repealed. So that's a high level description of the bylaw that's proposed and what we're recommending to the board. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Teichman. Trustees, do we have questions for Mr. Teichman? Seeing none, I will now look to the gallery to see if we have anyone who would like to delegate on this item. If we do not have anyone to delegate, then we shall proceed. I do not see anyone, so this concludes the second public meeting. As we mentioned at the outset, these meetings were held for the purpose of reviewing the board's current EDC policies, for informing the public about the EDC process and the proposed bylaws, and to hear public's views. Thank you very much. And with this, I shall adjourn the EDC public meeting. I'll look for a mover and a seconder for this. May I have a mover? Trustee Carabella. Looking for a seconder. Trustee Powell. I shall take this to a recorded vote. Trustee Saunders,
In favor?
Trustee Kelly,
In favor.
Trustee Carabella, Trustee Powell,
In favor.
Trustee Kennedy,
In favor.
Trustee O'Hunchinora,
In favor?
Trustee Agnew,
In favor.
Trustee Murphy,
In favor.
Trustee Chua,
In favor.
Trustee Bowie, Trustee Kuzma.
In favor.
So we have 8 in favor, none opposed, no abstention. The motion carries. We have adjourned the public meeting. And with this, I'd like to thank Mr. Teichman, Mr. Amendolia, Branco, Dylan, Superintendent Lofts, and all the team at the back, Director Klein, your team who has made all this possible. There's lots of activity happening in the background which you do not see. And thank you so much for coming and presenting. Thank you. With that, we shall move on to our next item, which is next order of business, which is delegations. We do not have any delegations today. Our next order of business is the consent agenda. The following items have been agreed upon at the agenda approval to stay on the consent agenda. Action items, item 6.1, 6.1.2, which is comprised of 6.1.2.1, 6.1.2.2, 6.1.2.3, 6.1.2.4, 6.1.2.5, 6.1.2.6. As we know now, the consent agenda has been broken up into 2 parts, the action item and the noted items. There'll be one motion for action items. There'll be no discussion, and the noted items will not be discussed except item 6.2.2. So with that, I will read the motion. Resolved that the Halton Catholic District School Board approve items 6.1.1, 6.1.2, the entire, on April 18th, 2023 as submitted. May I ask for a mover, please?
I'll move it.
Moved by Trustee O'Hearn-Chanada. Looking for a seconder. Seconded by Trustee Agnew. I shall now call the vote on the consent agenda. Trustee Kelly, how do you vote?
In favor.
Trustee Carabella,
In favor.
Trustee Powell,
In favor.
Trustee Kennedy,
In favor.
Trustee O'Hearn-Chanada,
In favor?
Trustee Agnew, Trustee Murphy,
In favor.
Trustee Saunders, in favor. Trustee Chua,
In favor.
Trustee Bowie,
In favor.
Trustee Kuzma.
In favor.
So we have 8 in favor, none opposed, no abstention. The consent agenda carries. We shall not be discussing the noted items. We shall move on to the next order of business, which is the approval of the minutes. We have none right now. Business arising from previous meeting, we are not going to discuss that. Action items, we do not have any action items. Let me just check that. We do not have any action items. Our next order of business is staff reports. And the first one is 10.1, 2023 Educational Development Charges Bylaw, Proposed Bylaw Renewal. Superintendent Lofts, please present the report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Attached is a staff report outlining the proposed bylaw renewal for EDCs. Branko Vidovic, our senior planner of planning services, will walk us through the staff report. Branko.
Thank you, Superintendent Lofts. Good evening, everyone. We've been through most of the, and through you, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. We've been through most of the EDC related material, so I'll just keep this as short as possible. And I may ask Jack Amendolia to step in if there are any questions. So I would just like to focus on a couple of things in the report. So the first would be on page 93 of the package, the eligibility and financial obligations. So based on the analysis done by Watson and Associates, Jack Amendolia, the board meets the criteria for eligibility purposes to have a new EDC bylaw enacted. And the next page I just want to put your attention to is the page 96, the net education land costs. So what's identified in the background study is 13 new elementary school sites. one elementary school site or an alternative accommodation project opportunity in an intensification area in Burlington, and 3 new secondary school sites. And then the last portion I just wanted to cover was public consultation and submission. So on March 23rd, 2023, a newspaper ad was published in local newspapers, Burlington Post, Georgetown IFP, Milton Champion, Oakville Beaver, and the Toronto Star advising of this public meeting tonight. That is a requirement under the Education Act. Following that, staff will continue gathering submissions from stakeholders and the public. And tonight, that was earlier in tonight's presentation for the 2 public meetings that are required under the Act. And then if I could just draw the trustees' attention to page 98, that will just outline the anticipated milestones. Oh, sorry, that's not page 90. At least it's not. Thank you, Elizabeth. Oh. Just one page down. Right there, thank you. So March 23rd, as previously mentioned, notification was sent to the communities via the newspaper ads. It was also, information was also posted on the school website. April 3rd was a stakeholder meeting with our community partners and the build industry. That is the Building Industry and Land Development Association for the GTA. Tonight, the 2 statutory public meetings were earlier in the evening that reviewed the policy and the background study, and also the second part of that second meeting was the proposed bylaw review. May 2nd, there will be an opportunity for public delegations at that board meeting. May 16th, would, as mentioned earlier tonight, would be an enactment of the EDC bylaw if passed by the board. And as mentioned earlier tonight, the June 1st would be the date that the new bylaw comes in effect if it is passed by the Board of Trustees. And June 25th is the appeal period. So that's the 40-day appeal period after the bylaw is passed. That's when it ends. And then if I could just have Jack come up, because the EDC background study is attached to this package. It is fairly lengthy. So I don't know if we should go through that first, or if Trustee Loss wants to read the draft resolution there, which could change. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I can read if you'd like, I can read the resolution. But I don't know if we have to, as it's just a staff report right now.
Yeah, that's a suggested resolution, which will go to the next board meeting. So we don't need to read that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vidovic. And with this, I shall open up the floor to trustees. Trustees, do we have questions? No? Okay, once again, thank you for your report. And with that, we shall proceed with the next order of business. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next order of business is information items. And the first item is item 11.1, student trustee update. Student trustees, please present your report. Who's presenting? Go ahead, Trustee Boli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. We have a bit of a long one today, so I apologize. On Wednesday, March 5th, we hosted our second student council consultation, this time in person here at the board office. Hopefully you saw some great pictures on Twitter of us here in the boardroom with all of our student council presidents. We gathered our student council presidents and prime ministers from across the board and had lengthy discussions about student council governance structures, best practices, and student voice relating to all things student council. Our conversations with our student council presidents and prime ministers will be continued throughout the months of April and May, and then curated into a report to be presented prior to the end of the school year. Additionally, during our last General Senate meeting at Corpus Christi on March 30th, the Student Achievement and Leadership Committee passed their pitch competition proposal where students would be able to bring a business pitch to compete for a prize. There will be an online competition for all students to participate in, followed by an in-person presentation for the winners of the online competition. This will take place in May and promotion will begin soon. As well, the Student Senate Environmental Sustainability Committee also passed their Earth Week and Climate Change Survey Statistics Delegation proposals, which we are excited to see come to fruition. Subsequently, we extend our biggest congratulations to the Holy Trinity Robotics Team 3161, the Tronic Titans, for qualifying for the first Robotics World Championship in Houston, Texas. They are on the bus today, traveling through the states to get to Houston. We are so proud of all of the hard work that the team put in, and we cannot wait to see the team compete during the World Championships.
And under our relieving section, we hope that all students, staff, and parents had a very restful and reflective Easter break. The Easter break highlights the sacrifice Jesus Christ made for humanity to rid the world of sin, representing the resurrection of Jesus and the victory of life over death. And many of our students were able to take the time over the weekend to rest and reconnect with their faith and with their families, celebrating the very special week. Subsequently, as Catholic Education Week is quickly approaching, all of our HCDSB Catholic Elementary and Secondary School students are connecting with one another for HCDSB's annual Journeying with Jesus event, connecting student leaders from all across our board to our Catholic faith. And additionally, every single year for Catholic Education Week, Asta Eco's Catholic Board Council creates their annual Catholic Education Week video, highlighting Catholic student trustees from all across the province, promoting each year's Catholic Education Week theme. This year, I am spearheading the creation of Asta Eco's Catholic Education Week video, promoting this year's Catholic Education Week theme, which is We Are Many, We Are One, and highlighting the importance of quality Catholic education all across the province of Ontario. And finally, this year, Ramadan is observed on the months of March and April, and many of our Muslim students across the board are observing the month with religious and cultural celebrations with their peers through school-wide iftar events and self-prayer and reflection. Many of our students, both Catholic and non-Catholic, appreciate the interfaith dialogue and mutual celebration of the Muslim faith during this time of Ramadan, but many students have raised concerns about the lack of religious accommodations for non-Catholic students in some of our HCDSB secondary schools.
To start off the belonging section, just announcing that the Student Senate is hiring for the 2023-2024 school year. The student trustees and student senate are currently promoting applications for the 2023-2024 school year to our current grade 9 through 11 students. Applications open on April 10th and will stay open until May 10th. May 19th, sorry about that. Using the following form, which is linked in the document. And for anyone who doesn't have access to the document, it's linked in the bio of our @HCDSB Senate Instagram account. And it's being emailed to all students as well. So check your emails. We're also excited to welcome the new senators and can't wait to see what next year has in store for the Senate. For applications, we're looking for hardworking, dedicated, and passionate students from all types of diverse academic, ethnic, and social backgrounds. Students who are involved in school communities, seeking leadership opportunities, and wishing to share their voices on behalf of the school community are encouraged to apply. Additionally, during our March 30th General Senate meeting at Corpus Christi, the Senate Special Education Subcommittee passed their Best Buddies survey and Every Student, Every Opportunity Embracing IEP's proposal, which would send out a string of posts on the Senate Instagram, each with the purpose of ending the stigma around IEPs. They will bring up important topics such as why do people have IEPs and what the importance is of taking away the stigma around them. Moreover, Mr. Lombardi was able to come in to present the student census results to our senators. Our senators were shocked by some of the results seen compared to how they themselves answered the survey. For example, one senator mentioned that they were feeling alarmed at some of the statistics talking about the LGBTQIA+ students feeling safe in our schools and how it was so low. Following the previous discussions that we've had, ideas were raised concerning staff and student diversity in the board. Some students or senators were worried about the diversity of students not being reflected in the staff and how this could possibly affect students coming from diverse backgrounds. Finally, at our last General Senate meeting, we had Taliba and Sarah from the Human Rights and Equity Department come in to give the senators a presentation on hate and bias motivated incidents, and included the definition and grounds for hate and bias motivated incidents, as well as what students can do in response to these incidents. Our senators were encouraged to share the online reporting tool and anything else they learned within their school communities.
Thank you, student trustees, for your report. I could feel the passion in this report. So, trustees, do we have questions for our student trustees? I see no other hands up. So, yeah, thank you once again for a report. And surely I'd like to wish the Holy Trinity team very well in the World Championships. I happened to be at the pit in the West Ontario Center, and really it was something to be there and exciting. So all the best to them. And thank you for your report once again, student trustees. With that, we shall move on to item 11.2, Director's Report. Director Klein, please present your report.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, sorry, I saw hands up here. Was it Trustee Kennedy? Did I miss you? You had a question for the, sorry, Director Klein. Yeah, I think I did not see. I don't want to be blamed again. So, Trustee Kennedy.
I'm just wondering thank you for Trustee Kuzma. Just wondering was any of the feedback regarding the survey, were there any positive reflections of the survey, things that they saw that there was an improvement in the last student census survey?
Trustee Boy?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I know that one thing that students were mentioning, well, because this was the first student census, they were curious to see how things would change. I know that there was a specific question as to how often this data will be collected and, what past trends were. I think overall, I mean, what was highlighted in the discussion were certain things that students were surprised by, of course. But I think overall, the results were positive. So it just depends on, what students were talking about. I think we had a really extensive presentation, but what students brought up were sort of those outliers that they saw and what we can do to address that.
Thank you, Trustee Bowie. Thank you, Trustee Kennedy. So with that, we shall really proceed with item 11.2. Director Klein, please present your report.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank, of course, senior staff and staff members throughout the board who really are at the background and the foundation of this report. The report is fairly straightforward, but it certainly reflects the breadth and depth of things that are occurring here at Halton Catholic District School Board, and certainly gives a sense of the rhythm of the school year. Certainly one of the first things we'll talk about in terms of sports too. You can sort of get a sense of where we are in a school year by what sports our children, our students are playing. A few highlights that I'd like to share, and if you have questions, of course, I'm more than happy to answer them. In terms of special education resources or services, we'll once again be offering this special education summer learning program. This is an in-person program that will be run half days in the morning at Our Lady of Victory Catholic Elementary School in Milton. Be from July 4th to 21st of this year. Hopefully you can see that. You can, right? Good. In terms of athletics, we're into the soccer season right now. The slide we have before us gives a rundown of the tournaments that are coming up over the next several weeks as we head into the end of May, with regard to our students throughout our system. And of course, many of you love to get out to those, and many of you have students who are there as well. Pilot program for the grade 11 English and Indigenous education is very exciting as we look forward to 2023-24 academic year. Part of our commitment to truth and reconciliation, as well as our board's Indigenous Education Action Plan, as part of those, we've looked to expand opportunities for students to take Indigenous education courses. This has been also promoted and supported through the Ministry of Education as well. The not too interesting titled NBE 3U CE is better known as English for grade 11, Understanding Contemporary First Nations, Métis, pardon the lack of the accent, and Inuit Voices. And these will be piloted for the year coming up at Holy Trinity, Notre Dame, St. Ignatius of Loyola, and St. Kateri. Right now, we're beginning the process of building up the capacity of educators to teach those over the next 2 months. Not teach them, but build up their capacity over the next 2 months. And we're very excited about that. Adult faith formation moves forward as well. A couple of highlights that Superintendent Narr wanted to pass on was the building unity out of diversity. That balance everywhere, but not certainly within the Christian faith and Catholic tradition, that unity out of diversity is a common theme. On April the 27th of this year, we will be holding a session for staff hosted by Reverend Francis Nerona, and Father will address the call and meaning of the Eucharist as a place where all may be one. He'll invite us to discuss how our diversity can make us stronger in our faith communities. Perfectly timed in the month of April as well, when we try and think about environmentalism, certainly the call of Laudato Si and other teachings of our faith. April the 26th, the third in a series of 3 sessions will take place virtually. The Eco Cafe program is designed to help participants develop and embrace spirituality that will sustain our efforts to bring about the change that is needed in our world to address the climate crisis. And this year's program is based on the book by Christine Walters, Painter, Earth, Our Original Monastery. And of course, a lot of research scientifically and in terms of theology with regard to environmentalism has been put forward historically by many Catholic scientists and theologians. Student census implications. I'm not sure if I titled that very well, but the gist of it is, going back to our last board meeting, we explored the results of the Leave Your Mark student census, and we reviewed and discussed the survey and identified actions based on these results. And these are ones that we can take fairly immediate steps on, and they reflect cross departmental collaboration. So we had asked senior team to kind of look at what are we either doing, almost done right now, as a reflection of how it would connect with the student census data, how it might be informed by it, or how it might be somehow interwoven, and what can we do or will we do in fairly short order. That would be within the next several weeks to a couple of months. And so it was, although each answered individually, there's a lot of cross pollination, a lot of collaboration. I think that's very important. Of course, all the different departments there are listed. I think that's a reflection of the collaboration and the common, values that we hold. So there's a lot of them. Some of them are fairly straightforward, right? Sharing the student census data results with regarding students with disabilities with central office leadership team. So I know that happened not that long ago in the students special education department and in other areas as well. The Student Senate Subcommittee on Special Education and special education staff will explore student voice within that. We heard a little while ago from our student trustees, again, the importance and the strength of Student Senate and how they are very active and very participative in all our areas, in all our endeavors, and for them to understand some of the data is important as well. I think that came up earlier. Members of the mental health leadership team and the advisory committee will complete a school mental health Ontario implementation scan. This is done on a fairly regular basis, sort of scan of our mental health and addictions plan for 21-22. We scan, we reflect on that so we can move forward, and that's going to be occurring basically as we speak. To increase accessibility of schools, including walkways, ramps, door openers, signage, and parking, etc. That's ongoing, but certainly the student census data that reflects certain needs and diverse needs of students in our community calls us to respond. As does the next one, and this came up a couple of months ago in a discussion here in this room with regard to construction of universal washrooms, and Superintendent Merrick had talked to us a bit about that. There is a plan to do these in a fairly well-paced manner, but that is beginning again as we speak with new builds and new additions to schools. And of course, it does connect to the results of the survey as well, that shows these needs are important. Ongoing consultation with equity deserving groups by our research department. I think Dr. Collmore mentioned that at our last conversation. And again, the conversations with the those groups has continued. The last one I might ask Dr. Collmore to help me with, because I was racking my brain in terms of the ARDS, but we will be again posting some of the information from our last from this survey so that our stakeholders and our public can see as well. Parent Symposium, conversations on identity and belonging, joining hands and hearts to create positive learning spaces for students will be taking place. That's with Dr. Ann Lopez, and I believe Ann is from OISE here in Ontario. Student Equity Symposium will be taking place in May of this year. We have modules on responsibilities of schools and boards to support the 2S LGBTQ IA community plus communities at the HCDSB, and onboarding training for staff. We have training for staff in all sorts of areas as common practice, and this is not least among those. The presentations, going back to the Student Senate on procedure VI 102, which is responding to hate or bias motivated incidents. Sadly, a procedure we need, and a procedure that we need all of us to be a part of the conversation. And again, it's important to have our student senators as part of that as well. Supporting Black student unions, graduation coach to support Black student achievement and well-being. And she is at St. Francis Xavier. Monthly meetings that have been taking place and will continue with the 10 GSA groups across our secondary schools throughout the year as well. We're hosting our first GSA retreat on May 30th, which will have a liturgy as part of that. The retreat's been planned with the leads of the school GSA groups. Collaboration with our human resources and research department to establish a workforce committee. Continuing, so you see the intersectionality and the cross-pollination of even other surveys and data gathering. Continued training all our staff on culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy, and the importance of knowing individual learners to personalize and differentiate instruction to support students who don't feel their identities positively reflected at school, who do not belong. Not merely the selection of resources that would resonate with the diverse community that we serve, but also strategies as well. Ongoing work by the Black History 365 Committee to continue developing resources for celebrating Black history beyond the month of February. Continued collaboration with Human Rights and Equity Department to offer equity and inclusion courses, Indigenous education and human rights, and anti-Black racism courses to all our HCDSB staff, as well as ongoing professional development at PD days, administrator meetings, etc. And we have a very good platform for staff to be able to go through those. A lot of it is virtual and online, but it's still very engaging and very topical. And for many, it whets the appetite for further self-development with regard to the issues of human rights and equity. Multi-year strategic plan. Don't think we've forgotten that. The multi-year strategic plan steering committee, as you're aware, met virtually on the evening of Wednesday, March the 29th. You were all there. The committee reviewed the progress made thus far, which included the appointment of Maximum City as the professional facilitator to guide the development of our new MYSP. You're probably aware that group helped our friends here at Halton District School Board, and also with our friends at, not that far from us, Toronto Catholic District School Board. Our next steps are to identify key stakeholders and determine consultation formats and questions, and you're probably aware we have a meeting next week. Thus ends the report. If there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to respond to them. I do apologize that I'm not apologizing, pointing out the reality that we don't have Superintendent Nar with us. And of course, these reflect all our superintendents, and nor do we have our manager of human rights and equity as well, who's a well-deserved break far away from us.
Thank you, Director Klein, for your report. We have questions here, and first up is Trustee Bowie. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. I do have a couple of questions. So are we doing two and then I'll go back in the list? Okay.
No.
Okay. Well, the first comment I'll make is that we're very excited about the NDE pilot program. So thank you to all the staff who have been working very hard. I know that Loyola is very excited that it's coming next year because we're one of the schools that's piloting it. So thank you to staff that's been doing all the fantastic work for that. I'll start with my first two questions. First, the monthly meetings with the GSAs, does that mean the meetings within schools, or is that board-wide monthly meetings?
Director Klein.
Chair, I'm going to direct that over to Superintendent Donalfo.
Thank you, Director Klein, and through you, Chair. Trustee Bowie, the GSAs have been meeting monthly with all the schools. So all the 10 schools, GSA groups meet monthly. Okay, and Vice Principal Amanda Morrow from Notre Dame, please that.
Thank you, Trustee Bowie. Your next question.
My next question was the board-wide GSA retreat. Is that being run by CETA and Human Rights and Equity, or is that?
Director Klein.
I might go to Superintendent Donalfo on this, but it is at the end of May, and I think as Superintendent Donalfo mentioned, I know Vice Principal Morrow is at the heart of it. I'm not sure if we're bringing in Lori's department into that as well, but I do know Amanda and you are part of that, and I do know we've got speakers who are part of this. We've got breakout sessions, and we do have fairly early on in the morning a liturgy as well, although who is the celebrant of that? I can't remember. I know I heard it this morning.
Thank you.
Superintendent Donalfo, is there anything to add to that?
Thank you, Director Klein, through you, Chair. Trustee Bowie, the GSA retreat has been planned together with the students. CETA, so the committee that is doing all the work for our community with regards to Pride Month has been working on this over the past year. So our committee then branched out. So there's a group from the committee that's been working with the GSAs to create those groups for them to meet monthly, but it's all done in collaboration with the bigger committee that's working on this. Okay?
Thank you, Trustee Boyle. I'll come back to you. If you can go back in line. Next up is Vice Chair Agnew. You have the floor.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So just a question with respect to some of the items that were identified in the student census next steps. So specifically, the note there with respect to increasing the accessibility of schools, including walkways, ramps, doors, openers, signage, parking, etc. And I'll roll that into the next comment about construction of universal washrooms. So have we gotten money that we don't know about? Just wondering where, is that, we had a 13-year plan for universal washrooms. So has that changed? If so, could I get some details? And then it's the same thing with respect to accessibility improvements. How is that happening?
Director Klein.
Thank you, Chair. You're right. There is a I thought it was 14-year plan with regard to this, but all plans start with the first step. So I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Merrick in that, in as much as there are things that we have on the go fairly soon.
Yeah, so first the bad news, there is no new money to finance these things, but we have been doing accessibility improvements to schools for the last 5 or 6 years since I've been superintendent. We typically pick off, it's usually our budget's usually around $200,000 to $250,000, and we pick off as many schools as we can fit within the area, doing ramps, door openers. It's usually 3 to 4 schools. I think you've toured some of those schools up in Georgetown, especially the first year we did it. We got lots of good feedback on that. So we're kind of making our way around to the schools. Usually meet with the spec ed department, pick out some schools where we think that those kind of actions will have the biggest impact, and then roll those out over the summertime. So that's kind of the first bullet point that was on the list there. The one with respect to universal washrooms, we do have new schools in construction right now that will have universal washrooms in them. So we have 3 new schools on the go right now. We also have, so trustees would have seen back in the fall, we approved a renewal project for St. Raphael's in South Burlington. That is one where a big part of that renewal project is actually in the spec ed suite there, and we were able to fit in a new universal washroom in there as well. While we're making a mess in the school over the summer and doing some construction, we thought it'd be a good idea to do the universal washroom there so as to not disrupt them again next summer and make another mess there next summer. So that's some of the work we were able to advance as far as universal washrooms. And then we still have 13 or 14 years left in the plan. So we'll continue on with that in future years.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Do you have a follow-up?
So just another, sorry, Mr. Chair. So just another question. When I'm looking at that, sorry, I'm just looking at my screenshot that I took. So you don't have to go back on So when I looked at some of the items that are being worked on with the various groups that we're engaging with, specific to the accessibility piece and the students with disabilities, is there a specific plan to engage SEAC in some capacity and in a dedicated capacity? Will SEAC be invited to participate in some of these ongoing discussions around how to improve accessibility and inclusion for students with disabilities?
Director Klein.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at Superintendent Rossini here, but I think I know what the answer is, but I'll turn it over to her. Go ahead.
Can you read that again, please? I'm sorry. The statement.
Yeah, just with respect to some of the planning that's taking place and some of the engagement opportunities that are happening as a result of the student census. I'm just wondering, are there concrete plans to involve SEAC? But, you know, I guess in what capacity will they be, you know, specifically brought in on some of these conversations about opportunities to improve inclusion and accessibility? Like how will we be looking to engage that committee on some of these initiatives?
Superintendent Rossini.
So we recognize that the input from SEAC is really important. And as an advisory board, we would want them included. And even if it's a subcommittee or there are committees that are established, that the invitation does go to someone on SEAC with respect to the scope of the work that they do for the board.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Any clarification? Good? Okay. Thank you. Up next is Trustee Saunders. You have the floor.
Oh, hi. Thank you. Through you, Chair. Director Klein, I'm just wondering, there was the Leadership Development Program for academics aspiring to positions of added responsibility. Is that a program that people that want to become vice principals or principals, is it sort of a developed program that people or staff are able to become part of?
Director Klein.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Trustee Saunders, I'm going to look to others here. Superintendent Narr is not here, and she's in charge of it. So it's a bit of yes and a bit of no. The leadership programs are fairly diverse. It's sort of a differentiated approach to it. These are certainly avenues for those who want to gain, roles of recognized leadership would be taking, but it's not restricted to that. So it reflects the fact that in any organization, and particularly in the gospel about the body of Christ, in an organization that reflects the gospel, that there are many people within a community who have leadership roles, and there's diversity among them. There are many people who would take some of the leadership opportunities, but might not necessarily gain the formal leadership roles. I'm just looking to see here if I have anything, but I think that's the case at this board as it is the case in many other boards as well. But Superintendent Narr and her team have done a very good job at making sure that these things are ongoing and differentiated and meet the needs of those who end up taking these courses as well.
Thank you, Trustee Saunders. You have a follow-up?
Just one more question. The GSA retreat, is that something open to trustees to attend? Are there any details you can provide? Or
Director Klein.
Thank you, Chair. This is a retreat for the students.
Just for students?
Yeah.
Thank you. Up next is Trustee Carabella. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I had a question about the pilot program that's being launched, the English and Indigenous education. Does the ministry give a minimum to a maximum of how many Indigenous English courses are to be offered?
Director Klein.
Certainly the ministry promotes this and the ministry supports this. In terms of the details of what you're asking, I'm going to look to Superintendent Kroll and see if he has any background on that. But I do know that we have moved forward in a very purposeful and very ambitious way on this. I think personally, I would think it would be a great reflection of a solid education in Catholic schools if students came out of high school having a course where they would be immersed in an English program that reflects the Indigenous culture, which is so rich presently and in the past.
Good evening, trustees, and through you, Mr. Chair. Happy to answer the question. Also have our Indigenous Education Advisor online with us as well, Sherry Sable, so she can help clean up any of the gaps that maybe I miss. At this time, there's no minimum requirement for Indigenous education course. What the ministry has done, though, is give boards lots of tools, lots of different courses. And this is a great example of a course where they've made it an equivalent to an existing course as a way to allow students and teachers flexibility, like the pilots that we're offering, to be able to offer courses specifically in Indigenous education that have the equivalency of an existing course. We've seen a few other boards. Most recently, Toronto District has made this move. So that was in the papers back in February. This has been in the work in our board pre-pandemic. So I think, without COVID, we would have been here a couple of years ago. But this has also been from the ground up. So this course has been run as an elective in a number of our schools for a number of years. And we're at a point now where 4 of our schools are saying we're ready to take this on as the grade 11 English program in at least one course. The reason you'll see it at St. Kateri running all the grade 11 English is because this is the first year they'll have grade 11 English. And with their patron saint also being Indigenous, we think it's a really nice fit for that school community. And the school community is really enthusiastic about moving forward with that. So certainly if our Indigenous Education Advisor, Sherry Sable, has anything to ask, I will make one more point though. Although the ministry doesn't make it mandatory, they provide financial support for boards to run Indigenous education courses. So they'll actually provide funding to run those courses at a lower student enrollment number than we're typically funded for, to encourage as many students as possible to take those courses.
Superintendent Kroll, I'll be looking for Sherry to give any addition.
I don't see her hand up, but that wouldn't stop her. If she has something to say, she'll say it.
Thank you. Trustee Carabella, you have a follow-up question?
My follow-up would be, what will be your measure of whether the pilot is successful or not?
Director Klein again.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to look to Superintendent Kroll. I think there's some fairly straightforward numbers in terms of, I think, enrollment would be one, and I'm sure there's a feedback loop for students in terms of how the course has impacted them at the end of it.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. We certainly would look at things like credit accumulation rate, sort of the success of students going through that course, and sort of our course median or course averages to make sure students are being successful in those courses. Part of it is also the success in building capacity within the system. So as Director Klein noted, we're being very intentional about the professional development that we're going to be offering our teachers that are going to be teaching this course next year, and partnering with teachers that are already teaching this course right now. So they can talk teacher to teacher about, this is what works. These are texts that work. Here's what you need to do, the sort of the background before you teach this text. And then our intention is to increase the capacity across the system so that all of our schools have teachers who've been trained by the end of next year and feel comfortable, ready to go for the following year. So it'll be like hard numbers, but also like teacher feedback, student feedback, to be able to say that, yes, this is the right move for us to go forward.
Thank you, Superintendent Kroll. Thank you, Trustee Carabella. I shall now move on to the next speaker, which is Trustee Ohan Chanada. You have the floor.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I just have clarity on the bullet point that talks about members of the Mental Health Leadership Team and Advisory Committee will complete a scan. Could I just get more of a fulsome clarity of what that actually is?
Director Klein.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Rossini, but this is, again, well, I'll turn it over to her. Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the School Mental Health Ontario has asked all school boards to report back to them through a questionnaire on how well we're doing in implementing our board mental health strategic plan and annual plan. And it's really for feedback with respect to how can School Mental Health Ontario support us and the work that they're doing for all 72 boards in the province. And it's also going to help us understand how well we're implementing our own plan and what parts of the feedback that we do get from the scan from the ministry that we can use to build into perhaps direction around the student census, and what direction can we take with our mental health strategy.
Thank you. No follow-up.
Trustee.
No, that's perfect.
Thank you. And up next is Trustee Kennedy. You have the floor.
just wondering, so there's a lot of action being taken on this survey. Is there anything faith-based? Just don't see anything, or are there any faith-based groups that meet in schools regularly? Is there anything changing there regarding in regard to the surveys or anything that's happening in those areas?
So we have the trustee candidate, we have the detailed report. I think this is just an excerpt of it, but Director Klein, you'd like to elaborate on your report as regard what trustee Kennedy has asked?
Thank you, Chair. Well, again, Superintendent Nar isn't here, but not that this is restricted to her portfolio. I would argue, I would humbly suggest that all of this somehow reflects our faith. Right? So all the work we're doing reflects our faith. So I don't know necessarily if there's anything more I could say about that. I do know in terms of the leadership, clearly with regard to, well, again, Superintendent Nar is not here, but I would think in terms of leadership development, we'd want to ensure that our leaders are aware of what this census has reflected. And even in the example that we had in the report tonight about that whole idea of strength through diversity or unity with diversity, I think somehow reflects this as well.
Thank you, Director Klein. Trustee Kennedy, you have another question or follow-up? Okay, thank you. And I'll move on back to Trustee Carabella. Your hand is up. You have the floor.
Thank you. Just I had a further just follow-up from my last questioning. When you do the feedback, you were saying there's students and teachers. I wondered, are parents ever included in the feedback on the courses? Thank you.
Superintendent. Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair. That's a good suggestion. We haven't taken that under, we haven't finalized what the feedback format will look like, but appreciate the input. That's definitely something to consider as we look to make sure the pilot's successful. So thank you.
Trustee Carabella?
I did have a follow-up on the symposiums that are being organized. Who is the organizer of that within our schools? Is it from a department or is it CPIC, or who is organizing the symposiums?
Director Klein?
Well, I think you're referring, Chair, sorry. I think Trustee Carabella, you're referring to the Parents Symposium?
Yes.
That one? Well, I'll look over here at Superintendent Dinolfo to see in terms of the organization of that. I know early on we talked about the fact that we do have a parent symposium about conversations on identity and belonging. That could be through our equity department. Oh, I'm looking at Dr. Collymore here as well. Go ahead.
So through you, Mr. Chair, thanks for the question. So the parent symposium and also if it's on here, there's a student one and there's also one for staff. So this one is all about equity. It's a collaboration between human rights and equity, the research department in relation to sort of the student census work, highlighting the importance of why we undertook the collection and how it relates back to education. So the parent symposium is a subset of that. Dr. Ann Lopez will be speaking to our parents, but she'll also be speaking to our staff, and she'll also be speaking at the upcoming student symposium that's happening in early May. So that's a collaboration between us three.
Thank you, Trustee Carabella. Thank you, Dr. Collymore. And up next, you have a
clarification. Just a clarification. Okay. Would that be virtual for the parents or in person? Thank you.
Dr. Collymore.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I believe the parent symposium will be virtual. Yes.
Thank you. Up next is Trustee Bowie. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. I also, just speaking very quickly to Trustee Kennedy's previous question, not to undermine what the director said, and that was completely correct. I will also just say that most of our schools also have culture of life committees, development and peace clubs, which are explicitly faith-based, but all of our clubs incorporate, our faith into all of the work that we do. My last question for Director Klein is, the bullet point that states supporting Black student unions, is there any more detail that can be provided as to what that entails or what's being done in schools that don't have Black student unions currently?
Director Klein.
Again, well, this is, I think, a question that would really be most effectively answered by our Human Rights and Equity head. And so I'm not sure if anybody else here has a sense of where we're at in terms of that development. So we'll have to wait and hear from her. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. With that, we do not have any hands up. Thank you, Director Klein, for presenting your report. We have a lot going on in our schools, and thanks for the update. We move on to the next information item, 11.3, 2022-23 budget report. Superintendent Loft, please present your report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Please find attached our 22-23 budget report ending February 28, 2023. Adam Cross, our Senior Manager of Financial Services, or I am available to answer questions. But first, I'd just like to maybe point out a couple of items. Just looking at the revenue and the revenue tab or the revenue page, it's interesting to look that the tuition fees are substantially up relative to where we had initially planned. This is reflective of the work of Superintendent Cadero and the planning team under the leadership of Senior Manager Branko Vidovic. So that's up actually substantially as a result of their work. Another interesting one, or one to kind of draw attention to, is just our interest revenue. So our interest revenue is up, and that's based on essentially all the, not essentially, it's based on all the rate changes that have happened throughout the year. I believe there's already been 3 rate changes this year alone. This year, obviously starting in September through now. It is interesting to point out, though, that there would be a higher amount of interest, but there is a portion of our revenue that's held back at the ministry's level. So that's kind of where a large portion of some of our revenue income is, because you might think it should be even higher than that. And that is a reason why it's not. On the expense side, maybe I'll hand it over to Adam Cross. Adam, do you want to maybe give me a couple updates on the expense? I can maybe just start it off. We did notice, you might see some of the tracking that we've done on the expense side. There's been a couple of items that may stand up. Department heads, computers are 2 of the ones that may look kind of funny. Looks like we've spent the majority of our funding already for this year. A large part of the computer side is based on timing, right? The timing of when we purchase it. And on the department heads, even though it looks like it's all been spent, that's the result of the way that we classify some of the expenditures within the system itself. So it's a classification issue where the majority of that expense may be sitting up in another line, or is sitting up in another line under salaries and benefits. And then we pulled out a portion of the department heads, trying to kind of align it a little better. Obviously, we still have some work to do on that alignment factor. But overall, we're tracking towards where we thought we would be at revised estimates. I don't know if there's anything else to add, or.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, to all the trustees. So one other thing that you'll notice, excuse me, is occasional teachers. So there is a significant increase in our occasional teacher costs that we're seeing this year, and we're monitoring it on a monthly basis. But just to give you some high level information, so we have roughly about 13,400 filled days, so absenteeism days this year compared to last year at February of 11,200 days. So quite a significant increase this year for occasional teacher spend. And then the one other thing to highlight that kind of sticks out compared to our budget is we have a employee long-term health cost that we have to pay into the provincial trust. Based on how it's funded, as of February, we've just allocated into the 4 key funding pools. Without reallocating it across all the expense categories for benefits, it's driving some of the costs up, primarily in school office staff, which represents a majority of the QP costs are being reflected there. By year end, they'll be reallocated to the appropriate department for year end reporting purposes.
Thank you, Mr. Cross and Superintendent Loft. Trustees, do we have questions for Superintendent Loft? I know you're trying to put your hand
I
up,
did.
Trustee Kennedy, so I'll give you the floor.
I see donations are up 6,000%, but they're small. What is that from? Is it just from a will or like the state?
Superintendent Lofts?
Maybe I'll defer to see if Adam might have the.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, to Trustee Kennedy. So that line typically is for donations that we receive at the board level, not specifically to a school, but all donations that we receive through the board office that then get distributed to the schools originally start at the board level. And this is just a timing thing. So the 6,000 that you're seeing there is actually revenue that needs to be allocated to the various schools. But as of our cutoff date of the end of February 28th, there's just a timing difference between when we collected the funds and when we've distributed them to the various schools. So there's nothing specific here like an endowment or a donation through a will. This is primarily just community members donating to specific schools, but donated it through the central board office donation portal rather than the school, and then we distribute it.
Thank you, Trustee Kennedy.
Just maybe you touched on, I might have missed that, Superintendent Lofts, Government of Canada down 83. It's just, is that a timing thing? I think you said it. I might have missed it.
It's typically due, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, it is typically due to timing. It's a cutoff, a hard cutoff, February 28th, so we don't accrue or anything like that for any of these reports.
And just very last, tuition fees. So is that what you were mentioning with Superintendent Cordero? So is that attracting students from overseas? So that's significant. I mean, 56%. I mean, how do we decide, is that, I don't know, it's the trustees or senior staff, how do we decide if that's a good area to put more resources into and increase revenue there? I mean, that's a really high number of percentage increase.
Superintendent Lofts?
I'll speak to it, I guess, quickly. We actually had, that area has grown tremendously over the last couple of years. So Superintendent Cordero has brought back some reports and some information of some of the trips that he has gone on in the recruitment, as well as the Broncos team as well that are going on recruiting and meeting with agencies and such. So we definitely have been putting more, not even more resources, but things are opening up right now, right? It's not like it was a couple of years ago, but it's definitely, there's been a lot of, good work done by both Superintendent Cordero as well as the planning team. So,
thank you, Superintendent Lofts. I'll move on down to Trustee Ohonchanada. You have the floor.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to reiterate, reading the report and reading the conclusion, you're not foreseeing any strong headwinds coming our way in a negative way. So we're on track as far as our revised estimates up to February 28, 2023, right?
That is correct. Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. That's correct, Superintendent Ohonchanada. As Adam pointed out, or Mr. Cross pointed out, sick leave is always going to be a concern for us. So that's not just for us, it's for a lot of boards across the province. So it is higher. We've allocated more budget to it, but we'll find out more. As far as the actual numbers that we have right now, we're anticipating to fall in line with what we had reported back in December with the board.
Thank you.
Revised estimates.
Thank you. And just one follow-up. And as the announcements are all very new and you just received your GSNs, if there's any update, obviously I'll bring it to the table. If there's any changes in what the ministry has just announced.
Through Mr. Chair.
Definitely.
Yes, we just received it late yesterday. Yeah. So we're still kind of going through it. It's quite a few, little bit of material to go through. So we are going through, we will be going through it. We will be, I have it on for our next board meeting. I actually, we're trying to bring, if we had some information, I would have brought it tonight. But I'll definitely have a report for trustees at our next board meeting, as well as, before that even, we can give some information out.
Thank you, trustees. Thank you, Superintendent Lofts and Mr. Cross for presenting your budget report, and which is appreciated. And we'll move on to item 11.4, which is the capital projects report. Second quarter, September 1st to Feb 28, 2023. Superintendent Lofts, please present.
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. Please find attached the information report for the capital projects for the period ending February 28th, 2023. Projects are tracking as anticipated. The report is being submitted as information for trustees.
Thank you, Superintendent Lofts. Trustees, do we have questions for Superintendent Lofts? See no hands up there, so thank you, Superintendent Lofts, for presenting this capital projects report. Okay, we have Trustee Kennedy.
It just goes back to the previous slide. Occasional teachers, that's obviously a lot higher.
You're going to the budget?
Yeah, is that?
I think we crossed that.
I had my hand up, but you had kept talking. So
yeah, we moved on to this report, but you know, if it is in between, I would say, okay, we got a different topic altogether. So sorry about that. But with that, thank you, Superintendent Lofts, for item 11.4 capital projects report. We shall now move on to our next item, 11.5 long-term capital plan draft. Superintendent Lofts, once again, please present your report.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, we're very pleased to present for the Board of Trustees tonight our long-term capital plan that basically looks at our capital needs for the next 15 years. I definitely want to acknowledge the hard work that Dylan Gunasas-Kara, as well, he's our supervisor of planning, Branko Vidovic, our senior manager of planning, and the planning team were all on a piece of this. It's quite an impressive document. It was all done in-house. You can really see the amount of work that was put into this. So I'd actually like to pass it over to both Branko and to Dylan, Mr. Chair, to kind of walk us through at least a little high-level report. The report is quite extensive, so we'll be going over each page one by one. We will not be doing that. Thank you. That's all, Branko and Dylan.
Thank you, Superintendent Lofts. Mr. Chair, may I proceed?
Yeah, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. So tonight we're bringing the 2023 long-term capital plan, the draft report. I will just do a brief overview before I hand it over to my colleague Dylan Gunasas-Kara. We won't go through the entire document as Superintendent Lofts mentioned. It is a fairly extensive document. So essentially, to cover, the long-term capital plan is a comprehensive planning tool that presents detailed enrollment projections and school utilizations over a 15-year period. The plan guides accommodation planning by setting short and long-term goals and objectives over that 15-year period. The data on the long-term capital plan is analyzed to three major things: identify enrollment pressures, such as over and underutilization of schools, and suggest preferred mechanisms for addressing these accommodations issues through school boundary reviews, accommodation program reviews, school additions and renovations, pupil accommodations reviews, which may result in school closures and consolidations. This component is technically under ministry moratorium, but that could come back through a ministry initiative. And the last item would be proposed new schools. And then item 2 would be through the identification of potential partnership opportunities as per Board Operating Procedure I-37, review, school accommodation review, consolidation closure, and the community planning facility partnerships. And the last item would be to identify future capital projects and potential future school closures and consolidations subject to this to be submitted in response to ministry funding announcements. Again, that component is still under the ministry moratorium. And as per board practice, staff complete the new long-term capital plan every 5 years. The last long-term capital plan was completed in 2028. However, due to the dynamic nature of accommodation planning and changes in Halton region, staff have conducted, where possible, annual updates to the long-term capital plan. Staff have conducted, where possible, annual updates. These updates were completed in 2019, 2021, and 2022. We did miss 2020 as due to COVID. And as now this 5-year long-term capital plan, the 2018 long-term capital plan has reached a 5-year window. Staff have developed a new revamped long-term capital plan for 2023, which will replace the 2018 long-term capital plan. And again, similar to past practices and where possible, staff expect to complete updates and enhancements to the long-term capital plan annually. And at this time, I'd like to hand it over to Dylan Gunasas-Kara the manager of planning, who will provide a brief overview and highlights of the new long-term capital.
Thanks, Branko. If I may, would we be able to go to the schoolplanning.hcdsp.org website? So the document is pretty large, so we weren't able to upload it to the agenda. There you go. Thank you. So if we go to page 1, just to start off here. So this is a new plan, and it has been significantly improved over the 2018 long-term capital plan. So this plan has been redesigned to create a more user-friendly document based on feedback we received from the public over the last 5 years. We have new maps, new infographics, and more school images to showcase our wonderful board facilities. We updated the long-term capital plan guiding principles. We did during this period receive the new 2021 census data, so that has been incorporated into the document. Enrollment projections have been updated to reflect new timing of development and most recent enrollment trends over the last few years. One of the biggest changes that we did this year is that the previous long-term capital plan, the schools were presented on a review area basis. So those were units of analysis for the planning department. However, for this version, what we did was we made those the family of schools. So this would make it more easier for trustees, staff, and parents to view all the schools at our board. So I'll go through a few of the pages and where to find the information. So if we go to page 4 of the document. So this is just the table of contents and just the overview of how we present the information. So starting off with introduction, information on the overview, guiding principles, methodology, and then going into more of the regional trends at the Halton scale, development areas in the region, and then we go into our schools. So this is more the board level. So programming, feeders, retention rates, grade 9 admission rates, facility information, so facility condition, long-term facility renewal strategy, our community planning and facility partnership list, and then we go into the schools by family of school. So we're just going to go to, if we can go to page 23. So this is the regional overview. So in this section, we provide an overview of the regional enrollment and the regional census data. So here you can see that the share of the population has changed since the 2011 census to the 2021 census. So the orange pie is the town of Milton. So the total population of the town of Milton used to be about 17% of the original population. So that has increased to about 22%. And then Burlington saw a decrease from about, I believe, 35% down to 33, I believe. And then Oakville and Halton Hills has stayed the same. And if we can go to page 25. Sorry, page 26. 27, sorry. If we go to the next page, there we go. So this shows the areas of development in Halton region. So the ones in green are your greenfield areas. So that's your typical plans of subdivision where we see a large number of new students coming to the board. These would have your low density units and some medium density or townhouses. And then the ones in brown, which is the intensification areas, these are your growth areas around GO stations. So Burlington GO, Aldershot. So here you'd have replacement of industrial uses, commercial uses into more high density condo tower type developments. Typically in these ones, we see less students coming to the board. However, with the housing prices in the future and well, housing prices now and changes in the market conditions, we might see more students coming from these areas to our schools. So just Going to the next few sections, I'm just going to skip to page 58. So this is renewal information, or sorry, the preliminary project timeline for facility renewal projects at the board for the next 5 years. So you can see we have quite a number of schools that are slated for renewal needs, as well as projects that would be provided at more than one school. So for example, we have special education facilities, community use facilities, AODA improvements, emergency projects, among those. We also provide this information on the family of schools section. So you can see all the information there as well. So if we can go to page 129. So this is an example of a family of school section. So here we have all the information for that relevant family. So starting off, we have a map showing the school catchment boundaries and the school locations. And we do have a link at the bottom left. So that directs you to more detailed school boundary maps. If we go to the next page, this provides an overview of the accommodation needs in the elementary and secondary panel, as well as any planned and proposed major residential developments in that family of school area. Go to the next page, please. So these are for the elementary panels. What we provide is our 2018 LTCP recommendations and the actions that have been taken to address those recommendations since then. We also provide the enrollment projection in a tabular format and a graphical format. In the graph, the enrollment is provided in the bars, and then you have two lines. The darker line towards the lower one is your building capacity for the area, and then the one above is your site capacity, which includes the capacity from portables. We go to the next page. Secondary is roughly, it provides the same information. The only addition here would be that we do provide the grade 8 to 9 retention rates. So for Holy Trinity, it's 89%. So that would mean that 89% of the grade 8 students from those elementary schools attend an HCDSP secondary school. And then right beside it is the grade 9 admission rate for that family of schools. So for example, here, 63% of the grade 9 students at Holy Trinity over the last 5 years were from HCDSP feeders. Another 27% were from the public board, and another 10 were from others. So that would be private schools or out of region. And I want to highlight at the bottom of this graph, sorry, the table here, where you see red text, that's where the enrollment exceeds the site capacity. So in those cases, we do need to have additional capacity built to accommodate those students. If we go to the next page. So this has the school profile information. So some facility information, school capacity, facility condition index, site size, as well as partnerships within those facilities. Go to the next page. And this provides a summary of the renewal timelines, as well as the recommendations to address the accommodation issues that were highlighted in the previous section. So all of the family of schools are organized in this way. So you have within those, I believe, 5 pages, all the information you need for that family of schools. And then we also provide a summary at the end on page 161 of the document. So this outlines the number of projects by category that staff are proposing to address those accommodation issues. And then if we go, this is page 163, please. We also provide a map of where those projects are located. And then finally, we do have a glossary of terms at the end of the document. Some of the terms that we provide in the document. So yeah, that's an overview of the new long-term capital plan. So I'll hand it back over to Bronco to go over next steps.
Thank you, Dylan. If we could go back to the board package, I would just like to go over a component of the board report. Thank you. So as part of the 2023 long-term capital plan, a list of potential community planning and facility partnerships is identified. And in accordance with operating policy I-37, community planning and facility partnerships, and the administrative procedure VI-78, community planning and facility partnerships, staff intends to host a community planning facility partnership virtual public meeting on May 1st, 2023. This is an initiative from the ministry, which is part of their policies. Community partners can approach us at any time, but we are, as part of policy, hosting a yearly meeting. So similar to similar to 2022, the public meeting will be held virtually with meeting material available through the schoolplanning.hcdsb.org website. At a minimum, those notified of this meeting are identified in the approved partner notification list found in section 2.1 of the Administrative Procedure VI 78. Other members of the community that have indicated an interest in participating in the meeting in the past will also be informed. And in addition, notification will be provided to trustees and members of the provincial parliament. The community will also be notified by way of a news release. So there's two types of partnership opportunities that will be presented at this meeting. It would be new capital projects and existing schools with underutilized space. So based on the accommodation strategies presented in the draft 2023 long-term capital plan, a summary of the potential partnership opportunities is provided in table 1 in the report. I won't go through all the list. If there are any questions at the end, we could do that. And then table 2 identify schools with underutilized space for potential partnerships. All of these potential projects will be reviewed by staff on a case-by-case basis. These are just potential partnerships, and it would be at the board's discretion which ones to pursue. And then the last component of the report would be the public feedback. All potential projects will be reviewed by staff, again, on a case-by-case basis. Following the release of the draft 2023 long-term capital plan, staff will send notifications to the community, inviting stakeholders to provide feedback on the information presented in the plan and the recommended accommodation strategies. Staff will also host a virtual public information meeting on May 3rd, 2023 to provide community members with information on the new 2023 long-term capital plan, and a placeholder for public delegations will be provided as part of the May 16, 2023 regular meeting of the board. Feedback will be considered prior to presenting the final 2023 long-term capital plan to trustees as information at the June 6th meeting. And then I will just like to go over the table 3, the tentative dates for the 2023 long-term capital plan. So the process really started back in October, November of last year. November 25th, 2022, planning staff have submitted projections to the ministry. December 20th, staff brought a report to the board regarding the ministry submissions of the enrollment projection report. April 14th, the draft long-term capital plan was posted on the school planning website. Tonight's meeting is where we're at right now. It is highlighted in the staff report. So this is the draft 2023 long-term capital plan. Next step is between April 19th to the 21st to launch an online survey for public feedback. May 1st, we will be hosting the community partnership facility partnership virtual meeting to community members. May 3rd would be the virtual public information meeting for community members for the long-term capital plan. May 1st would be when the online survey to the public closes. And as mentioned earlier, May 16th would be a placeholder for delegations, if there are any, for the long-term capital plan. And finally, June 6th, there will be a presentation of the final long-term capital plan with public feedback as part of that final report. Sorry for being long in my responses and talking so long about the report, but if you have any questions for Dylan and I, would be happy to answer it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vidovic and Gunasekara, for presenting this very comprehensive report. And you said it was done in-house, right? So yeah, thank you. Kudos to you. With this, I will open up the floor to trustees to ask questions. I see a couple of hands up. Trustee Saunders, you have a hand up. You have the floor.
Yeah, through you, Chair. You mentioned there would be potential for partnerships. I'm just wondering, who we went by that pretty quick. Who were our potential partners? What were you thinking about?
Trustee Saunders will address the chair. So, Mr. Vidovic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's actually in the board report. There is one section of the board. I will just refer to it again. It was section, I believe, 2.1 of the Administrative Procedure VI 78. It outlines partnership, our partners, our community partners.
Sir, could you tell me who they are?
Sure. I'm not sure if we can bring it up on the screen now. It's essentially the municipalities and anyone that has expressed interest. I don't know if we can click it.
Superintendent Merrick, yeah. Go ahead.
Thanks. It typically tends to be like municipal partners, the region, the province, or local nonprofits as well. Like some of our bigger partners now are ROC, Reach Out Center for Kids, YMCA. We have 3 different YMCAs within Halton region. So we have, they operate many programs at some of our schools as well. So, but through the actual community and facility partnerships program, we've had one application in the last, since I've been superintendent, in the last 6 years. So we have the meeting. There's lots of opportunities for people to put applications in, but they do need to cover their costs to operate within our buildings. And that's usually where a lot of them fall apart. They want free space and not necessarily offering kind of their share of the operating costs for those facilities. So that's a bit of history in that.
Trustee Saunders, you have a follow-up? Sorry, Sabidovic.
If I could answer the question through you, Mr. Chair, I have the list of partners if you'd like.
Could you email that to trustees?
Sure, yeah. Absolutely.
Trustee Saunders, you have a second?
Just a follow-up. I know that the Premier had mentioned that they're coming up with a new strategy on sort of inventory schools and underutilized schools. Have we been able to have a chance to look at that and determine if that's going to impact this plan?
Superintendent Merrick, you'd like to do that?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. That is something we would do at that community facility partnerships meeting. We would offer up facilities where we have spaces. That being said, our schools are very full and we have very few spaces in our facilities. We do have some new schools that have some space open, but they're filling very quickly in new growth areas. So there aren't a lot of opportunities, but we do offer those up to the community, and some groups have put forward in the past saying they see a need for those spaces.
Thank you, Trustee Saunders. I'll move on down the list to Trustee Carabella. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on page 3 of 8, there's a reference to the French immersion program regarding the registrations. And then it says here, there's uncertainty regarding the impact of BIRD resolution to allow all registrants into the French immersion program in grade 1, starting in the 2022-23 school year until trends can be established. So I'd like clarification on that. I think all of our students were accommodated this year because that's referring to this year. But what kind of trends are needed, or what would be happening with this?
I'll pass this to Mr. Vidovic or Mr. Gunasekara.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Trustee Carabella. So in terms of trends, typically what we've done in the past is when the program was capped, we had a certain number of students that would go from your SK, for example, into grade 1. So we have those trends. However, with the opening of the program, we have certain schools that are seeing higher number of students that now go to the French immersion program, and others who are seeing lower number of students. So until we get 3 years of data of how the opening access program works, we won't be able to establish full trends when we do the enrollment projections.
Thank you, Trustee Carabella. You have a follow-up?
So the clarification is that you're just like waiting to establish trends, but you do expect to be able to accommodate the registrations.
Mr. Gunasekara?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Carabella. Moving down the list, we have Trustee Ohinchinada. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, just a question about the timeline for parent feedback. I just want to make sure that it's clear. So April 19th, tomorrow, to the 21st, it's going to go online for a survey. It's going to take a few days to get it out there, right? Then May 1st, they're all virtual meetings. The first one's for community partners. The next one's for public, right? Okay. And then May 5th, the survey closes, and then you leave a placeholder for delegates, and then June 6th, it comes to us, right? I read it through here, but that's clear, right? What kind of 5 years ago, I guess, is the last time you did this? Do you have people that come to delegate? Do you have a lot of participation? Because I guess 5 years ago wasn't virtual, it was in person, right?
Mr. Vidovic?
I can't speak to what happened 5 years ago. I wasn't at the board, but I do know in terms of public feedback, we do get substantial feedback from the community. It's submitted online, but in terms of any delegations, we did an update last year, but I'm not aware of anyone coming in person and delegating the board on that matter. I don't know if Dylan has anything to add.
Thank you, Trustee. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, we haven't had any delegations for this. Even the 2018 plan, there hasn't been any delegations.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Trustee Ohinchinada, follow? Okay. Thank you. I do not see any other hands up, so thank you so much for your presentation and look forward to completing the process and hearing back again. So thank you so much, and thank you, Superintendent Loft and your team. With that, we shall move on to item 11.6. 2023-24 budget consultation survey results. Dr. Collymore, please present your report.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. The purpose of this report is to provide you, the Board of Trustees, with the feedback received from our 2023-2024 consultation survey for our budget. As a component of our annual budget process, each year we do hold a consultation survey to seek feedback about our proposed budget priority areas, as well as to help us identify any potential areas for achieving savings and efficiencies for the next school year. This year, our survey included 5 open-ended questions, 1 per pillar, and 1 question about our cost-saving efficiencies. Each pillar question stated what the strategic priorities were for that area, and then asked our respondent to share any comments or suggestions related to the budget allocation in these priority areas. The survey was available online for our community from February 28th to the 15th. An email invitation was sent to all of our stakeholders. And additionally, we posted information about the consultation on our public websites, via social media, and our Halton parishes were also contacted and asked to post messaging on their bulletins and on their websites. In total, we received feedback from 533 respondents. Approximately 2/3 of these respondents were parents or guardians or caregivers. We've shared the feedback received with business services, and they'll be using this feedback to review and incorporate it as they plan for the next school year's budget. And the comments are all provided for you in the Appendix A to help guide your decisions with respect to budget for next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Collymore. Trustees, do we have questions for Dr. Collymore? Seeing none. Thank you, Dr. Collymore, for presenting your consultation survey report. And with that, we shall move on to item 11.7, construction report. Superintendent Murray, please present your report.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. We have 3 projects under construction here as current in our report for April. First up, we have Milton number 3, or the future St. Kateri. Moving along very well there with masonry and underground services. Up next month, we have slab on grade pours planned, as well as the precast for the first floor, hopefully coming in, booked for May 8th right now. And then continuing on with masonry and underground services. Next up, we have the Milton number 9 school. Again, in a very similar state to Milton number 3, doing some masonry and steel erection on site. And up next month, doing slab on grade and more masonry there. Moving along with the superstructure. And then lastly, we have the North Oakville number 4 build, which is a little bit earlier in the process. We have footings and foundation work ongoing, as well as some grading work on the back half of the site. And up next month, starting with the underground plumbing and then continuing on with masonry and grading on the site. So happy to take any questions that trustees have on any three of those projects.
Thank you, Superintendent Merrick. Trustees, do we have questions for Superintendent Merrick? No? So thank you, Superintendent Merrick, for your presentation on the updates on the construction. And with that, we shall move on to item 11.8, which is the OCSTA verbal update. Trustee Ohanchanada and Vice Chair Agnew will present. Trustee Ohanchanada, you want to start?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of verbal updates. Not this week, but next week, April the 27th to the 29th, Oxford is holding their annual general meeting, to which many trustees here are going to be attending. It's going to be a great weekend. There's a lot of great guest speakers, some great breakout sessions, and a chance to speak with other trustees of other boards across this wonderful province of ours, Ontario. I'm very proud to announce, and with the help of many trustees, we have 4 resolutions that will be put forth at our annual general meeting. I think it's the first time in a long time that this board has actually put forth resolutions. So those of you pray for us that we get these resolutions moved and passed at the AGM next weekend. That's my update. Over to Trustee Agnew.
Vice Chair.
Great, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add on as well that Oxford has put together a new large urban board committee, and it's comprised of representatives from Toronto, Hamilton, York, Ottawa, and Dufferin-Peel, as well as Halton. And I had the opportunity to attend that first meeting. It's really a great opportunity to discuss those specific issues that may be plaguing, if you will, or of interest to some of the larger boards. So an example of some of the things that we went over in our first meeting, they included items such as capital improvements, budgets, new schools, issues around diversity and equity and how that's impacting some of those school communities, as well as, recent announcements that have come from the minister. So I will be coming to my fellow trustees to see if there are items that you would like to bring forward that you feel are things that we are looking at that might be unique to us as a large board that we want to bring forward to this committee to have conversation and discussion around and to share ideas about. But it's exciting, it's new, and I think it's fantastic that the larger boards will have an opportunity to share with each other. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair and Trustee Ohanchanada. Trustees, do we have questions on this presentation on this report? Seeing none, I just want to thank Vice Chair and Trustee Ohanchanada for your engagement with the OCSTA in the background. And I want to thank all our trustees for the resolutions. We worked on that. We should be all proud of ourselves for putting together those resolutions. And we hope to see all of us at the AGM next week. So thank you so much for this update. With that, we shall move on to item 11.9, Extensive Trip Advisory Committee, ETAC trip proposal. Superintendent Cordero, please present the highlights of your proposal.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. On Saturday, April the 8th, students from Holy Trinity Catholic Secondary School competed and qualified for the first robotics World Championships in Houston, Texas. Since attendance at the World Championship requires immediate preparations and advanced travel, the Extensive Trip Advisory Committee, better known as ETAC, met on Wednesday, April the 12th to review the school's proposal to attend the event from Monday, April 17th to Monday, April 24th. The ETAC committee reviewed the submission to meet all the established criteria and approve the trip. Attending the World Championships will provide students with an invaluable learning experience, the opportunity to further develop a variety of 21st century competencies, and hopefully a lasting impact on their academic pursuits and future careers. On behalf of my senior admin colleagues, we wish the students and staff attending the trip a safe, successful, and highly enjoyable experience. Through you, Mr. Chair, I welcome any questions that trustees may have.
Thank you, Superintendent Cordero. Trustees, do we have any questions or comments? Seeing none. Thank you, Superintendent Cordero, and we wish our students all the best in the competition.
You're
once again. And with that, we shall move on to item 11.10, CCSTA Convention and AGM. Trustees, Vice Chair asked to remove this item from the consent agenda. So Vice Chair, your question, or trustees, if you have any questions on this.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it was an information item that had your name beside it on the agenda. So perhaps you could speak to what that means, what the opportunity is, and for people who are not aware of what CCSTA is.
Oh, sure.
Just identify that.
Yeah. Thank you, Vice Chair. I do not know what is the intent. But again, this is the CCSTA, which is the Canadian Catholic School Trustees Association. This is the superset of the OCSTA that we have, which is Ontario Catholic Trustees Association. It's all Canada-wide. And every year they have this convention, this AGM, and trustees from all over the country get to attend. This is as part of our policy one second, let me get to that number. As part of policy I-34, trustees are entitled to attend this conference. It is like no different than the AGM. But since it is out of province, we have a policy which says we bring it to the board, and that's the reason why it's here. But the intent of a couple of trustees have expressed their intent to attend. This was the invitation went out to all trustees to attend this conference, and a couple of trustees have planned to attend. I was hoping to attend, but I could not make it. So Trustee Ohan Chanara, Trustee Saunders, and Director Klein will attend on our behalf, and we'll bring back information from there. Items in this conference is in your package. Topics that trustees will attend are in this package. Besides the election of the governance, CCSTA governance, where trustees will get to vote for the governance of the CCSTA committee. The cost for the travel is in the package itself. It's not unusual. This is typical of conferences that we attend. And the benefit of attending the conference is we meet, collaborate, learn from trustees, Catholic partners across Canada, build relationship with trustees across the country, across the province, supporting Catholic education in Canada, and participating in trustee governance function. And with that outline, I will invite members who are going to speak to it. If you would like to, Trustee Ojanada, Director Klein, and Trustee Saunders. I believe Director Klein had conversations with his colleagues, Director across the province, and got some feedback about this conference. So Director Klein, could you add a little more?
Thank you, Chair. When the chair noted with me about a month and a half ago that the STA was having this annual conference, so it's not a surprise, but first one that's face-to-face in many years. I had emailed the small but hearty group of directors in the province with whom I connect often virtually, and asked what was happening at other boards. So I do that with about 6 or 7 different boards, and they all said that every board was going to be sending 3 or more trustees to this, and that the directors would attend with them as well. I think I've shared with you at one point that in my own personal history that I had a father who was a Catholic school trustee, and I do have recollections of tagging along to some of these conferences before, and it was really, it still left me with great memories of people who across the country found fellowship and camaraderie and a common value and love of Catholic schools and education. And that was at a time when Catholic education was more, I think, strongly supported by governments in different provinces, and I think we know that that's not the case now. And I think it is important to show solidarity with Catholic schools, leaders and trustees and families in other provinces who are not as fortunate as us to have the support that we have. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. And with that, we hope to, by going to this conference, we hope we build relationships across the province, learn best practices happening in other boards and across the country, and bring it back to our board. And we can try to, choose some of the good things happening elsewhere and bring it to our board. So with that, any questions, if trustees have, I'm happy to answer. Thank you. I see no hands up, so that was easy. With that, we shall move on to the next order of business, which is miscellaneous information. We have a couple of items here. Item 12.4. This was added at the approval of the agenda school climate survey. Now, give me a second. Let me find my notes. School climate survey was added by Trustee Murphy and seconded by. Okay, it's not important right now. So anyway, Trustee Murphy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. Do I have a certain amount of time, or is it just questions to whomever can address it?
Yeah, we really do not know what
Okay.
it is, but give me a second. Let me just check the bylaws.
I checked, there was nothing.
So miscellaneous information talks about information of a general nature provided to trustees at a board meeting. The information is deemed to have been received by virtue of inclusion in the agenda. No action is required. So go ahead and present.
Okay. So with this climate survey being administered around now, I just had many questions. And so through you, Mr. Chair, to whomever can answer this, is there a policy and or procedures that govern how we undertake the student surveys from start to finish?
So the idea of this session is not to get into discussion and debate. So what I would suggest is if you have the questions, we'll take the questions, Director Klein will take the questions and get back to you on that, or maybe ask at some point in time, Director Klein. This is more of an information session where trustees provide information on skilled trades, for example, and letter to minister, something like that. So I think the best way would be for Director Klein to take down the question and get back to.
I have like 7 or 8 questions, so.
Sure, could you email them to Director Klein? And
I was hoping that maybe other trustees might have some input as well, that they might be interested to know. Should I just be CCing everybody on it and create a whole email dialogue? What's the best way?
If you have 7 questions here, I think you email it to Director Klein and trustees, and we'll make sure the questions are answered and included in the next minutes of the meeting.
Okay.
Right? Sounds okay. So do one thing. Ask the questions now
You want me
so
to
that
just-
it's in the public
I'll
session.
just say them out. Okay.
yeah.
So my questions were regarding procedures and how this is undertaken from start to finish. I had questions about young children having various reading and comprehension skills and how this is accommodated. I had a question about, are teachers given any direction on how to administer this? The other thing is that I understand that there are students who are sharing devices, so I have concerns around student privacy and peer influence and how that would affect the results. How are students that are opted out to be handled? There doesn't seem to be any procedure around that. I also noticed that school level emails didn't include the survey items, only the email coming out of the board. And I think that it would be helpful to have that as parents pay more attention to the school emails. I also felt there wasn't enough notice given to parents, and so I had questions about notice and if that was anywhere in procedures. And I also wanted to mention that there's why we didn't elect to have young children from K to 8 do the survey alongside their parents, because there's at least one more board in Ontario that does that. And that was it.
Yeah, so good questions here. This requires some thought. I'm pretty sure staff, it needs to go back to staff and get questions. So email those questions to Director Klein and trustees, and we'll make sure you get a response and goes into the next Trustee Kennedy. Trustee Saunders, you have your hand up first.
Yeah, if I can just, I had a great opportunity last night to attend the parent meeting at St. Nicholas, and I just asked them about surveys, and a number of the parents mentioned that they didn't look at the survey because they thought it was about climate change. Apparently the title fooled them, and it said, have you guys had a look at this? So just an FYI that there was about 20 around the table, and a bunch of them said they thought it was about climate change, and they didn't do the survey. So just a little exploration.
Okay. Thank you, Trustee Saunders, for your comment. Trustee Kennedy, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just similar questions to what Trustee Murphy was saying. The initial email was March 30th, but there was no questions. We did get that resolved. But the questions came out on the 3rd. I think they corrected the link and finally sent it April 4th at 11 o'clock, but the opt-out time was that same day at 11:59 p.m. that night. So, was that enough time? I had some feedback from some parents saying it was like 12 hours to go through that. And if you're busy that day, you don't get to it and you can't, there was no extension given for opt-out time. Also, some questions about the student census, that was really, it's an automatic opt-in for elementary students. Parents have to opt out. Sorry, for this survey, it was more of an automatic opt-in, parents can opt out, but for the census, parents actually opted in to the census. So why was there a difference there? Can we have some?
Yeah, so if you can combine all those questions, I think it's better if we combine all those questions together and we get one comprehensive, and it's always improving the process, right? We did what we did with our survey, but it's always improving the process. There's always scope for improvement. Nothing is cut in stone. So I would suggest, yeah, you have any other questions? Sorry.
They do, but I can put them together.
Yeah. Yeah, let's put them together. Okay. Sounds good, Trustee Murphy?
Yeah, just to follow up, I was wondering if it's possible to do a notice of motion that I can request a report. Would that be a better route to, provide a bigger, like a more, well, those 8 questions.
So yeah, I'll repeat it. My mic was off. So you could do a motion to request information on each of those items as a report.
Okay, I'd like to do that.
Yeah, so then you'll have to put a notice of motion at the next meeting and ask for A, B, C, D, E questions, all the questions again, right? Okay. So I think you can combine this together. You get a report. Yeah, make sense?
Sure.
Or if you want
it's all new to me,
okay. So we can either go that route, or you can email the questions to all trustees. Director Klein will bring you information, whatever works for you.
Let me mull it over. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, trustees. With that, moving on to item 12.5, which is skilled trades career fair updates, and that was Trustee Saunders, was it? So, oh, sorry, Trustee Kennedy. It's your item 12.5. You have the floor to talk about this.
Yeah, so there's a skilled trades fair this past Saturday. I was not able to attend, but I know our superintendent, Emil Sordo, was instrumental in it. And it's the second annual, so maybe I'm just wondering if we did chat briefly before, but maybe just comment. It's the second annual. How has it improved from the first one? What are some of the feed comments we got from parents and students? And overall, how successful do you think it was? I think it's really important. I mean, we have a shortage of skilled workers, so this I think this is very, very important. It's a great career opportunities for students coming out of school.
Thank you, Trustee Kennedy. I was there. Trustee Vice Chair was there, and Superintendent Del Soto. Would you like to speak to that, Superintendent?
Thank you, Trustee Kennedy, and through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, it's wonderful to actually end a meeting or close to the end of a meeting on such a positive note. The second annual skilled trades career fair really focused on how do we create those pathways for kids who are really looking to explore their passions and interests in an industry and pathway that speaks to their interest and their passions. So for example, the difference between this year and last year was last year we had more skilled trade organizations in doing hands-on types of tasks for the kids, but we didn't have, because of COVID, they weren't allowed, the colleges and the organizations to come in and provide how to get to the college organization and what they can do. And so this year what we did is we combined both of them. And so every station that was around was represented with either a hands-on activity or a simulation type that spoke to the program at that school or in that organization. We also had Leuna present to talk about benefits and wages and really the money, so that kids saw that they can actually make a phenomenal living while they can sustain themselves and that they were in demand. It was last year we had about 700 people who registered because of COVID. We did the registration and it was a steady pace of people coming in. It was such a great success that we decided to repeat it. This year, we had the exact same in terms of people coming in. There was a lineup. We started at 10 o'clock and there was a lineup at 9:45 of parents and kids trying to get in. Now, this is all possible because of a number of components. The Pathways team with the consultant John Dietrich and the 10 itineraries, they really organize it because they work with the grades 6, 7, and 8s on various pathways and bringing in the skills into the classroom where they make, for example, the grade 8s would make communion crosses for the grade 2, and they would learn a number of that pieces as well. But what I also loved about it is that what we have here where all the elementary schools were represented. So there were kids from all over the board that had come because the principals from every elementary school had advertised it. And as a result, we had a number of grade 6, 7, and 8 students come just before they go to high school to really learn about the pathways. Another great component about it was that they were so busy that the colleges couldn't get away to go have lunch because there was this constant group of people coming in. It was lovely flow. Had a great time with Vice Chair Agnew and Chair Marvin, where we really went around. Well, I tried to get anything that I could eat that was for free. And I asked for swag. And so at the end of the day, what I really enjoyed was the conversations I had with the colleges and the trades. Well, what they were saying is that this was one of the best ones that they've ever been to. And they said, and we'd like to come again next year. And then they even gave me feedback. So for example, I said, maybe try to have a keynote speaker at one point so they can come in. And this came from the university, from the Niagara College. And so at the end of the day, what we're doing is collecting that feedback and starting to think about maybe we want to be the board that becomes the central hub of the GTA that really starts to look at how we inform parents and kids into the trades by working with the trades. The other piece was the number of parents that gave me feedback on how thrilled they were that this was finally happening. And so it was a great success. And again, we had over 500 people for sure. I know that because we had a number of free swag to give away. And so when you have a little bit left over, we know that we hit a certain number. So I really do appreciate the support, and we're really excited to be planning the next year's one in collaboration with guidance counselors as well. And I'll talk a little bit about that in May when I'll do a school update on really what we're doing in student success. So as we say in my hometown, bring your vino. Yeah.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Superintendent Del Soto. Trustee Kennedy, you can sense the excitement. Thank you for bringing this item.
I think that was a great way to end the meeting.
Thank you. No, we're not finished. We're not done yet.
Well, the miscellaneous part of
We're
the
getting there. So with that, thank you for bringing that item up. And with that, we move on to item 12.6, which is the letter to Minister regarding Holy Cross Catholic Elementary School. Trustee Hunchanan.
This is how we end the miscellaneous part of the meeting. So I'd like to start with a metaphor because I do have a flair for the dramatic. So 9th inning, 2 out. Okay. I'm going to read a letter. I've sent it to the fellow trustees so they knew what I was going to present today, but this will be going to Stephen Lecce, our Minister of Education, as soon as we can put it on letterhead. Dear Minister Lecce, I am the Catholic school trustee currently sitting on the Halton Catholic District School Board who serves the community of Halton Hills. With the full support of my colleagues on the Halton Catholic District School Board of Trustees, I am writing to request your consideration for a proposal developed by HCDSB staff that would help address the needs of students and families in Georgetown. Background. Holy Cross Catholic Elementary School in Georgetown was built in 1959, and over the years it has undergone 7 renovations additions. The school building was constructed on the top of a hill, necessitating 3 different levels of outdoor play areas and posing significant accessibility challenges. In 2004, Halton Catholic District School Board purchased land in Northwest Georgetown with the hopes of constructing a new school building to replace Holy Cross School. Our board has applied for school funding to construct a new school to replace Holy Cross on 10 separate occasions since 2008. Last school year, our school board placed the replacement for Holy Cross School as our #1 priority in the annual capital priority submission. Unfortunately, despite the support of our local MPP, Ted Arnott, Our request for capital funding to support our Georgetown community has been denied each year. As the Holy Cross School building continues to deteriorate year after year, the situation has become increasingly more challenging, and we are in dire need of a solution that will address building and accessibility deficiencies. To that end, I'm writing to you today to request your ministry's consideration of the following project proposal, which provides an effective solution at no cost to the province. Proposal. Halton Catholic District School Board staff are proposing a new elementary school building to accommodate 593 students be built on the land purchased by our board in 2004. The proposed new school would be constructed at no cost to the province by utilizing the proceeds from the existing Holy Cross school site. The net cost for a new school building would be less expensive than undertaking a site renewal project and will achieve a great number of critical objectives, including an improved facility condition, provide accessible interior and exterior spaces for all students and staff, address a current shortage of childcare spaces in Georgetown. I have attached an executive summary of the Holy Cross School replacement, which provides additional details. Support required. In order to proceed with this option, we will require an exemption from Ontario Regulation 193-10 to permit the use of proceeds of disposition on the construction of a new school building. Final comments. Our school district takes great pride in being able to offer quality Catholic education that meets the needs of all learners in supportive, creative, and innovative learning environment. A new school building to replace Holy Cross Catholic Elementary School is absolutely essential if we are going to continue meeting the needs of students and families in Georgetown. As a trustee in my second term of office, I have watched with great delight as other communities across our region continue to thrive and flourish with the ongoing support of the Minister of Education through the provision of funding. I am grateful for the ministry's commitment to helping us meet our shared responsibility for publicly funded education, and I respectfully request that the same commitment be extended to the students and families in Georgetown. Thank you in advance for your consideration. I would welcome an opportunity to discuss this proposal in great detail. Having said that, this will be sent to the minister. We did have a visit with some trustees, and Superintendent Merrick has been a godsend to me. He's helping me support this. He won't give up. He'll continue to try. The school community as well has been great support, but my fellow folks in Georgetown, Halton Hills usually are pretty understanding. We're not understanding anymore. We want a new building. It's not accessible for staff or students, and it's not good anymore. So whoever will listen, whoever we'll speak to, we'll get their ear, and we will make this happen. We're in the 9th inning with 2 out. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Ohanchanada. Trustees have any comments? We did visit the school and it does need work. We know that. And hoping we can get the year of Minister Lecce, Trustee Ohanchanada.
With all due respect, it needs more than work.
Well, yeah. Okay, any comments? Thank you, Trustee Ohanchanada, for presenting that. And with that, we shall move on to the open question period. Director Klein, do we have any questions submitted?
Chair, we don't.
Thank you, Director Klein. We do not have any questions for the open question period. And we do not have to go in camera. Resolution regarding absentees. We have all trustees present today. And we move on to the last order of business, which is adjournment and closing prayer. May I have a motion to adjourn? Trustee Saunders, looking for a seconder, please.
I'll second it.
Trustee Murphy, all in favor? Anybody opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries. It has been a long meeting, very long meeting, and I will close with a prayer from Trustee Powell. Trustee Powell.
For those in the salary and bargaining meeting, just pretend you've never heard this. I'm recycling my prayer. Join me in the sign of our faith. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Dear God, be with us as we close this meeting. May the topics discussed today be observed and respected. Thank you for guiding us in the areas where we need to take action, and we ask that you continue to direct us as we follow through on decisions being made. May your wisdom continue to guide us as we go our separate ways and keep us safe until we meet again. Amen.
Thank you, everybody. Good night. We had a great meeting. Good night.